Chapter 357, Evil to Evil. Imagine a scene very shocking even on a Daedric point of view. That how the blood eagle can be described. Zykel was standing behind John, and his red and black skin was actually showing signs of turning pale as he took a few steps away from John. This was the reaction of the meanest and darkest creature witnessing the scene. Now imagine the others. The screams of Alaric were pitiful and heartbreaking. The forsworn besieged in the cave were weeping. The spies and assassins sent after John were shivering. The Dare troopers were frozen in silence as their master was executing punishment. John's relatives who came to rescue him were expressionless. John started by undressing the upper halves of both Alaric and Madinac, and then he put down his armor and shirt too for the horrifying wounds on his body to appear. The vine that was attached to his body could be seen clearly too. It was red with thorns growing on it, as if a blood vessel has found its way out of John's body. The appearance of the Briarheart vine made John's following actions very justifiable. Putting that aside, the wounds on his body alone showed how much he suffered during the past few months. The stab to the heart that has survived by shifting his organs was also clear from both the front and back. It was retribution, and the madmen of the Reach were now facing a true madman seeking vengeance. When the showcase was over, John held the dagger and carved Alaric's back from the bottom upwards. 2 similar cuts were applied on the side, avoiding all blood vessels and vital organs. John then started the skinning Alaric's back, shaping his skin to what can be described as wings. Alaric groans and howls have long since stopped. His vocal cords seem to have been damaged. A sudden action started to happen, and John noticed Alaric trying to swallow his own tongue. "Nope, you ain't getting away." The knife in John's hand opened Alaric's maw by force, cutting his tongue and throwing it on the ground. Alaric was in agony, yet the pain kept him fully awakened. Despite how much he bled, John focused to stop all the bleeding with precision. He seemed to have trained a lot for such a complicated process. "Please refrain from doing such a thing. This ritual is not for torture, it is an offering. If it was me, I wouldn't have toyed with you that much, but sometimes a cat enjoys toying with its food. And the Daedra want a good show." John smirked and continued. "Here, to pass your boredom, let me tell you all about a story. It is a story about a man that calls himself the King of the Reach. You all know him as Madinac, this guy's grandfather. As you all knew, Madinac should have been dead many years ago, yet the bad Nords kept him alive. For what exactly?" John started to stray off to a different subject, pulling out the attention towards Madinac. Madinac's head, which was lowered from the start, rose up and glared at John with bloodshot eyes. "Yes, see, the Nords had a good idea back then. Let's keep the man which the Forsworn would die for and control them through him. For that, they kept their enemies around as their watchdogs who would strike down those they wanted out of the picture, and made a chain of command linking all the Forsworn elders to Madinac through their agents. By that, the Forsworn elders would hear the words of Madinac and obey, sending many young Reachmen to fight for the Nords' cause. Fascinating story, isn't it?" John's words were shocking to many. It was true. Madinac was kept as the control device of the Forsworn. Withdraw from here, keep watch here, intercept that caravan, kill that person, and so on. The king that all the young Reachmen looked up to was nothing but a toy in the hands of Nords. Of course, things shouldn't have gone down that path, and Madinac would revolted against his captors and escape in the future, but that's a morning never come now. "Oh, look, we are almost done." Alaric heard what John said, but he was too busy handling his own pain after he got skinned like that. John finished the skinning and threw out a sword this time. Just as everyone thought it was over, John started to break Alaric's ribs from the spine. This was even more demonic than just skinning. John broke a rib, then twisted it, and used it to support the wings of flesh and skin. With each rib broken, both wings started to spread. It was horrifyingly artistic. John didn't go too far with the ribs. He wanted Alaric to feel it all and live to the end. Alaric was already at his end. He was about to die any second now. John made the best of the last few seconds and took out a plate of fire salts, a very active alchemical ingredient. He held the fire salts with his bare hands and didn't mind it burning him. With his hands, he applied the fire salts on Alaric's lungs exposed from his back. "Ia!" A horrifying hoarse shriek came out of the dying Alaric. It was as if he got brought back to life just by the fire salts. It was the last step now. After applying the fire salt, John held the lungs and pulled them out from the back with the wings and ribs. Alaric's head dangled down, and his suffering in this world was over. John pulled out the harpoon and Alaric's soul with it to be damned to oblivion. With that, the soul sigil stone in Zykel's hand glowed brightly in purple light, then dimmed down once again. Zykel, who was drenched in cold sweat, confirmed the light and spoke. The 1,000th soul. The deal with Lord Molagbal is complete. As if waiting for these words, a strong pulse sounded from John's body that everyone heard it. The lowered gazes looked up once again at John, only to find him kneeling on his knees, barely supporting himself with his arms. What is going on? As someone asked, everyone started to feel worried. All were worried, but too scared to approach John now. His image of a torturer demon was still vivid and caused every soul to refuse to approach him. Groan. On the ground, John groaned with a pained tone. The Briarheart vine on his body was fighting him with vigor. Don't think for a second that you can ever beat me. John's tyrant aura started to appear one more time after almost 4 months of suppression. Don't you dare. The aura intensified greatly. It was not just felt or seen, but it caused the wind to move violently. It was going out of control. No, the tyrant was breaking free and his anger was beyond the limit. This ignorant, pathetic, and puny parasite thinks it can even for a second has its way on the tyrant? It was infuriatingly idiotic. The curse of Alaric broke, the deed was done. And the Briarheart vine tried its best to resist. It was a vine no longer. It was using all the energy and blood that it absorbed from John all that time to give birth to another existence. Branches, leaves, roots, a trunk, a new Briarheart tree that fed on the tyrant for almost 4 months was now trying to take form. It grew on John's back and soared up almost 3 meters trying to dig its root in the ground. The tyrant was pissed to the limit. He shouted atop his lungs. Vikmah Thar. Defeat, fall, obey. The tyrant shout was right on time. The Briarheart tree shattered like glass, and its wood turned into nothing in front of the true tyrant. The core of the tree was the vine. Not much different from its former appearance. It was just a small, bloody vine with thorns and very lively movements. It tried to jump away from John, but the latter already cast magic on it. Telekinesis. John was so delighted that he finally used this magic one more time. His telekinesis was stronger than it was ever before due to his increase in strength, but still he had a long time to completely recover. He was still greatly weakened. John tightened his control over the vine that was twitching like a snake and called out an empty containment chest out of the cube, then shoved the vine in and sealed it. Phew, huff huff huff. John knelt on one knee as he was already very exhausted. His body started to bleed, and from the spots where the vine was, they will leave horrifying scars. Still, John's vitality was great, and his body was healing just by him applying his energy on himself. The bleeding stopped, and the injuries were closing. That was all. A victory over on piles of corpses just to heal himself. Demonic. Terrifying. Accursed. With all that, the grin on John's face wasn't down. He stood up staggering and walked forward towards Madenak. With a thunder cookie, Madenak's head was blown up to pieces. John reached out to Zykel and touched the soul sigil stone to receive the last hard-earned reward from Molagbal. Unexpectedly, it was something John liked so much. I see. John immersed himself in the new knowledge that he gained and looked at the cave that was fortified with the remnants of the Forsworn. He walked towards them and the backed in their cave further. He then cleared his throat and spoke 3 words. Krah Ywlri. Cold, flame, essence. This was Molag's last gift. A shout. The essence-draining flame shout. Words of power only used by the Daedric Titans. The Titans are the dragons of oblivion, if the word was said right. They were an imitation created by Molagbal when he tricked a dragon into his realm to seek out the secrets of the dragons. Though he failed, He turned that dragon into the first Daedric Titan. This shout unleashed the might of oblivion on the Forsworn hidden in the cave, consuming them to piles fine snow ash. This was the third and the last Forsworn horde that ever dared to face John Dare. The man who sees one difference between slaughter and laughter, and that's the S. John. Still, every tyrant has his off button. John's was the girl who is descending from the griffin right now. John saw her, and all the sense in the world returned to him. He was no longer the mad killing machine. He was taken with surprise and hardly finding any words to use in front of Alina. She looked around to see the mayhem he started. She then looked at his body and saw the grave injuries, the eaten-away flesh, the broken body. It was horrifyingly mysterious. How is this man not dead yet? Hell, the blood was not going out of those wounds anymore, as if it was avoiding going out. John's body was a mystery that made all shiver in its might, yet Alina looked at him with pity. "You are done?" John averted his eyes away when Alina asked him. Alina sighed without saying anything. John's violent action would surely cause a mess on both the short and long runs. From necromancy to torture to coming like after his secret identity was blown. "We need to return Joel's condition," Alina said, but John interrupted. "She will get better now that I regain my power." That was true. Now that his powers are back, John can already guarantee Joel recovery. He could even see the system rebooting with many messages popping around everywhere. John looked at the ones behind Alina, who walked over to him. There was Johnrad, Tyr, Vladimir, and Hafthor, as well as some recognizable faces. John felt grateful these people showed up. His actions were surely rash, but he had a little choice. Azura demanded Alaric's death, so it was necessary to go through that Forsworn horde, and Molag Bal demanded mortal souls, and the Forsworn were John's enemies who deserved to be damned to oblivion in his eyes. He had a lot to answer for. Before he could say anything, a twist in space occurred not far from them and two figures came out. The first supporting the second. The first was Nurina and the second was Jelinar. John and Jelinar saw each other and gasped from shock. He was in a sorry shape, and she was in a sickly shape. None of them looked better than the other. Nurina and Jelinar noticed the place they were in and saw the corpses burnt to snow ash and the undead roaming around. John felt awkward to be scolded again, so he retreated Odakuro in the cube and the undead away. "Sorry for the scene." John looked at Jelinar and spoke. She smiled at him. "It's okay. No matter what darkness you walk through, you are still my light." John's chest tightened all of a sudden. Light. That's it, that déjà vu he had. Whenever Jelinar says that he is her light, he also replies the same. But this scene and light. John's hair stood up as he looked behind him right away. He was looking at Zykel. "Sorry, mortal. I guess our fun time is over. Lord Molag Bal is very pleased with your performance." Zykel said those words and started fading back to oblivion. With that, John looked up at the sky. Damn it. It was time. Something appeared in the sky, and the weather changed dramatically. The blue sky turned red and a dark crimson sun-like sphere appeared in the middle. The first to gasp was Johnrad. My God, aura manifestation? A blood sun? Who would have such an aura that reddens the sky in the radius of more than 5 kilometers? The aura manifestation is a realm beyond what is known. It is when the aura turns into real magic, unique and powerful. A personality and a will combined with energy to create an effect that personifies the aura of the owner. From that fake crimson sun, a few beings started to appear. They were what John saw in his dreams. Pale skin, long limbs, evil faces, sharp claws and fangs, broad wings. The weak-willed can never withstand the aura that blocks the blessing of the sun of the day and turns it into a horrifying curse. These beings were nothing like John saw in the game. They were scarier than anything he could imagine. Vampires, noble vampires. And the one leading them, the one who the aura belonged to, was none other than Harkon. Chapter 358, Clash of the Titans. Announcement. A new system was implemented for Extras. Here it goes. Gift this novel on PayPal. plus $10 / extra. Pat / rayon goal, plus 4 extras / month. Extras, 5,000 / 8,000 votes. Mess has methods to ruin everything in mysterious ways, and that was the title of the day. A messy day? The sky turning blood red for the radius of 5 kilometers was seen from nearly everywhere in the Reach, and even from Whiterun and Solitude. Under that red sky, there was a fake red sun created by the aura of a powerful expert who was probably the cause of the event. The suffocating presence was already nerve-wracking. This power was not ordinary in any way possible. It was the power of transcendent being. The weak-willed fell in a state of complete loss and absence of all the hope in the world. Barely those who could use their auras enveloped themselves with it to stand still. The ones much better off were the strong experts like Jonrad, Tyr, Nerina, John, and Alina. Those 5 were the only ones withstanding the pressure with no need for their auras to be active. What in oblivion is that? Alina was horrified by the appearance of those monsters. Only the other 4 could tell what they are. Nerina was the first one to snap out of it. Retreat. All of you. Alina, take John and Joel with you. No, John. As she was about to prepare for retreat, the leader of those monsters extended its hand towards John, and a strong suction force pulled John up the air towards the monsters. John was frozen solid as if he already knew it would happen, and he had no hope of stopping it. Vampire, what do you think you are doing? Release him. A strong aura shook the world and an angry voice sounded. A mighty flame was unleashed from Jonrad, and a gigantic whip of fire was unleashed towards those vampires. Behind the leader of the vampires, 10 vampire lords moved to block the whip of fire. 3 of them stood between their lord and Jonrad, blocking the mighty fire of Jonrad and counterattacking at him. Break! Jonrad's powerful attack that was aimed at the leader of the vampires was blocked, but it obliterated the vampire that blocked, sending it crashing to the ground. Jonrad's body started to glow as his flaming aura was already unbearable for others to be near him. The other 2 vampires started to battle him, and soon the third recovered and joined the fray. It was 1 man against 3 vampire lords. Alina, focus. Take the girl and retreat as far as possible. Don't leave any mortal around, or the vampires will try having their way on us. Nerina gave a series of orders to Alina to wake her up. Still dazed, Alina barely responded while pointing at John. I got her. Out of nowhere, a voice sounded and a small person appeared beside Alina. Gleam looked at Alina, then slapped her. Out of it. But, John, you'll make things worse. Alina could only take Jellinar from Nerina and retreat. The 2 girls were looking at John while being dragged backward by Gleam towards Lochthar. Nerina didn't even bother with the identity of Gleam and leaped forward towards John. A strong lightning spell broke through the air and targeted the leader of the vampires that was pulling John towards him, but 3 vampire lords stepped forward to face Nerina, and another fight broke. 1 woman against 3 vampire lords. There was still Tyr left. His hand moved like lightning, and a dozen silver streaks targeted the leader of the vampires. One of the vampire lords stepped forward to block them, only to find those hidden weapons are actually made of silver. Its body was wounded as it shrieked loudly. Recognizing his strength, 3 vampire lords assaulted Tyr all at once. The 3 masters were facing 9 vampire lords. It was a huge disadvantage, and as the 3 were occupied, John has already arrived towards the leader of the vampire while being held from the neck by the monster. Their eyes met, yet John was unfazed by the vampire lord's enthrallment. John and the vampire lord looked at each other with strong eyes. John's body was ravaged by many wounds and curses. Despite that, he was as lively as ever. His blood was refusing to come out of his body despite the many wounds, and his magicka seemed to be powerful, but it was exhausted. The vampire lord was awestruck for a second, but it was for his favor. John's point of view was much different. Since the appearance of the foul creature, John could tell how unfathomable and deep the energy of that vampire was. It was strong and chaotic, but that wasn't all there is to it. The vampire lord from the game and the vampire lord in reality are worlds apart. How to say it? The vampire lord in the game looked way less threatening than this being. Vampire lords are normal-looking vampires in their normal form, but in their lord forms, things get ugly. A bat's face on a bald head with large bat ears coming from the sides. The mouth had a lot of fangs, and the skin was ashen gray with a network of blood vessels moving beneath it. The body was as large as the firemen's themselves, and the arms were extremely long with long razor-sharp claws. From the back came out 2 wings. Unexpectedly, they were a lot different from the game. These were full wings that extended twice as long as the body on both sides, unlike the game's wings that were torn and short. The appearance of the vampire lords in reality put the appearance of their counterparts from the game to shame and disgrace. In my estimation, vampire lords should look more like the ones from The Witcher 3, Blood and Wine DLC, something like Detlef. So I made a mix from both ideas. John, who was being held by the vampire grip, resisted the blood magic that enveloped him, igniting his magicka and aura at the same time. Like a rusty machine, the law on nature around John started to show signs of being challenged. 2 unimaginable strong forces started to clash, and the space between them was getting wounded at a rapid pace. With a crackling sound, magicka anomalies started to appear and break between John and the leader of the vampires. By the pure power challenge between the two, the situation escalated to a 4th fight. Unfortunately, John's power was exhausted while the vampire lord is in his best condition. Even if the two were in their best conditions, John's wouldn't have that much confidence facing that entity. Still, a growling sound came from deep within John, and his body started to move despite the restrictions. So, that's the power of the child that was prophesied. I would be disappointed if it was any less. The vampire lord spoke in a deep voice despite his evil appearance. John was still growling like a beast, and his muscles moved with his magicka to put all his power in resisting. What is more surprising was you muttering my name just now. The vampire lord continued, admitting his identity to John. I knew it. Harkon. John seemed not bothered with the identity that made greater men wet themselves in fear. He took the challenge head-on. I would love to know more about you and how you know me, but this is not the time or the place. Let's have a chat later, boy. For now, Harkon spoke with interest showing on his monstrous face. He exerted his true power at John to completely suppress him. John groaned painfully as Harkon moved him towards the blood sun that manifested by his aura. Once John arrived there, he was locked inside it. Harkon didn't mind and sealed John by Corpse Curse, a spell that paralyzed John completely. Now, let's finish things and go home. Harkon rallied his minions to not dally and handle their opponents. Jonrad was the least at a disadvantage. He waved his katana in all direction, and this, searing strikes, was trimming away his opponents. Once he saw John being bound to the blood sun, Jonrad started using everything in his arsenal. He punching the ground hard, and the earth shook. Magma erupted from beneath his feet and enveloped his body, forming a magma armor. A vampire lord attacked him from the back with its claws, only to get its hand all burned. Another vampire lord commenced an attack, and Jonrad summoned an obsidian shield, fully blocking the attack. Jonrad countered with a punch, stone fist, carrying a portion of a magma rock and slamming it at the vampire, pinning it to the ground. The valley almost shook from that attack, but Jonrad was not done. His fingers dug in the vampire like claws and unleashed his power. Petrify. The vampire started to turn into stone on a rapid pace. With a kick from Jonrad, that vampire broke into ash. 1 down. During the last attack, Jonrad used Inhale to gather the magicka around him and empower the next attack. Once the second vampire was on sight, Jonrad exhaled a fiery breath of a true dragon knight. 2 down. The third vampire was much stronger, and the fight between him and Jonrad elongated. On Narina's front, she was avoiding all the 3 vampires nimbly by magic. She moved like a flash of lightning without being touched, using Bolt Escape. Her left was shooting an endless spray of lightning splash, and her right was preparing for an magicka overload spell. Once her opponent was in aim, she unleashed the magicka overload, blowing off the vampire into nothingness. 3 down. Tyr was the most unfortunate of the 3. He was fast, nimble, and resourceful, but he was the closest to the retreating kids, and all he was focusing on was how to keep those who were behind him alive, and himself too. The first vampire he shot down with the silver needle recovered, and now he was about to face 4 opponents on his own, but that didn't go as he expected. The fourth vampire jumped up and charged towards Alina. No. Tyr wanted to retreat, but the vampires around him pinned him down with nasty smiles on their faces. Alina, watch out. With Tyr's shout, Alina noticed the imminent danger charging at her. With no confidence to face such a monster, Alina almost froze. Girl, the branch. Gleam pulled Alina's hair towards the branch that was on Locther's saddle. Alina got the enlightenment and pulled the branch with telekinesis, just in time. The large branch flew towards Alina right before the vampire strikes. She retreated backward as the vampire's claws were about to cut her head and used the branch as a polearm. With her eyes closed, Alina could no longer feel her head. She thought her head was off her body only to open her eyes and see the branch going through the vampire, turning it into ash. 5 down. The vampires were reduced to half their numbers right away, but the situation was still bleak. Alina stood up and looked at Tyr, who seemed to be in trouble. Would not KSD. Whirlwind, Fury, Tempest. Alina shouted the whirlwind sprint and charged at one of the vampires with the branch as a weapon. One more vampire was struck and reduced to ash. 6 down. There was now only Harkon and 4 more vampires. Never in his wildest imagination did Harkon think he would lose many men on this pace. He was infuriated and raised his hand upwards, evoking a massive spell. Damn it! Nurina detected the change first. She was the first to try to react and shield herself. The spell that she kept as a tight secret all her life was cast, Bone Goliath transformation. Her body was replaced with a gigantic undead creature that carried her aura and power. It was a transformation skill only a few necromancer even heard of, let alone cast. She used her undead powers to conjure up a wall of bone to shield everyone around her. The situation of 2 great power clashing at each other almost broke the space on a massive scale. Harkon's spell was unleashed, and the bone wall withstood to the best of its ability, only to break after consuming half of the spell's power. The undead form of Nurina tried to move again, but the strike has already arrived. Expecting a massive and painful clash, the world shook and Nurina appeared away from the hit. Not just her, Jonrad, Tyr, Alina, and almost all who were close to the impact were pulled away. Something mysterious happened. Harkon looked around with anger ready to pour his wrath on whoever interfered, and what he saw was a silver-haired dark elf standing in front of the Nurina. She was dressed in a simple home dress and holding a spoon which seemed to have a scent of food. That was Master. Nurina gasped in her Bone Goliath form, none other than Alf Fyr. Alf glared at Nurina, and the latter turned back to an elf right away. Her master appearing in front of her was something as unbelievable as vampire lords popping up out of nowhere. Alf surveyed the surroundings with a look uninterest, and then her eyes landed on John and Harkon. John was locked in the blood sun, and Harkon was glaring down at her. She simply moved one hand, and a strong beam of light shot towards Harkon. The vampire lord was about to dispel the magic with the back of his hands, only to find the unfathomable force behind the magic deadly. He didn't dare to face it head-on as he realized that Alf was a being as strong as him, if not stronger. He evoked his best magic and faced Alf with it, turning into a magic duel of 2 ridiculous creatures. The 4 remaining vampires didn't survive under the pressure and broke into a strange bloody mess. Harkon was pressured with every ounce of his being in front of Alf, but soon, another change happened. An ancient roar sounded out of nowhere. The surroundings shivered with the new force that arrived. No, it was there from the beginning, but it started to manifest just when it felt a weakness in Harkon's aura. It was John. His tyrant aura was eating away the blood sun aura at a rapid pace. Not just that, there was another manifestation. Dozens of serpentine creatures started to form through John's aura. These were Fire Wyrms. The Fire Wyrms were the source of the roar. The roamed through the blood sun and started biting it as if a monster was devouring something. Alf's eyes widened brightly. She smiled and spoke. So it was him all along. Harkon felt the dangerous pressure that John gave off and wasn't sure if he can face both John and Alf at the same time now. He had to do something, but someone else did. Alina ran towards John with the Eldergleam branch at her hand. Once she reached a certain distance, she threw the branch towards John with all her power. John, hearing her voice, he opened his eyes and reached his hand out. His lips moved to say something to Alina, but no voice came out. Only she could read his lips. The clash between Harkon and Alf resulted in a large blast. Alina was close to the effect. Jonrad leapt towards Alina, using the dragon leap power. Wings of a dragon appeared behind his back, and his leap crossed that distance in an instant. He arrived at Alina and carried her, then leaped back again. Harkon and Alf retreated because of the blast. It was disadvantageous for Harkon to continue this fight any longer. He flapped his wings and flew towards John like a flash. John already had the Eldergleam branch in his hand, but he had no time to do the famous stick-to-the-heart move. Harkon held on John's body, and a suction force took them both out of this place. The blood sun disappeared as well as John and Harkon. Karthspire settlement was leveled to the ground, and the survivors of the mighty, even whether they are dare troopers or nosy spies, welcome the real setting sun once again, as if someone just came out of the grave. Jonrad, Alina, Nurina, Julinar, Tyr, Vladimir, Hafthor, Freya, and everyone else had a massive, "oh shit," floating up to their heads. Alf turned around with a relieved face. Phew, that went well. Chapter 359. Among the Vampires. John opened his eyes and sat up to see himself in a dark room lying on nothing but the cold floor. The room was large and had a high ceiling with 2 platforms on both left and right. At the end of the room there were many windows with the light of day coming down through them. That light fell on the apex of the room, illuminating the only object that is placed there. A blood fountain with a demonic head that the blood comes of its mouth to a sink under it all on a pedestal. A shrine of Molagbal. The blood flowing through the demonic head was not normal. It was thick as if made of a liquid plastic, yet still with the luster of the blood. John looked at the shrine carefully and realized where he is. Fokihar Castle. He was speechless and lied on the ground again. Just give me a break. He wasn't in any mood to feel good about anything. Why on Nirn did this happen? He didn't really need to ask himself the question. It was clear after all. Lord Harkon on Clan Fokihar is looking for 2 certain Elder Scrolls for a certain purpose. How does John know all that? Like anything else. From the game, of course. Still, this was no ordinary questline. This was a DLC main questline. It was the Dongar DLC, but didn't it start a little bit too early? John wondered to himself. What started too early? A voice asked John. Without getting up, John looked with his eyes towards the source of the voice, then averted his eyes again. You and me. We shouldn't have met just yet. Fate has been altered. Sigh. I guess I am to blame. John replied nonchalantly. A man walked out of the shadow from the side of the room and stood beside the shrine of Molagbal. John sat up, then checked himself to see himself completely fine. Not even a scratch or a bite mark. Not even a chained or having his magicka locked. John grinned as he looked at Harkon and spoke. I don't like being underestimated, but I think I should thank you for doing so. How so? Harkon's deep voice echoed around the room. Well, for now, I seem to be free of any restrictions. I guess I can just teleport away, you know? Even under your nose. John said as he stood up. You can? Don't worry. I am not planning on keeping you in the castle if it is against your will. Harkon said as he looked with ridicule at John. Then I'll be taking my leave. John turned around and walked towards the end of the room. He tried to open the door, but it was locked. John looked back at Harkon, who waved his hand, and the door opened. With a nod of gratitude, John walked out of the room. He knew that the exit is right to the east through the main hall of the castle. John simply walked with sure steps through the corridor that was way larger than the game. He then arrived in the main hall and saw the horrifying scenes in it. Even though his heart was ready, He flinched with disgust and looked around cautiously. Down in the hall, there was a number of long dining tables with all scenes of gore around them. People in dark leather costumes gathered around other people devoid from clothes or dignity while being preyed upon, not in a cannibalistic fashion but in vampiric one. Other humans were gathered in a corner in the room dressed in rags and chained by the necks. These are the human cattle hunted by the vampires. In a fit of disgust, John almost mustered up his voice and shouted this place to oblivion, but he knew better. He just walked lightly through the hall under the curious gazes of those vampires. He crossed the bloody floor to its other end and soon reached the stairway leading to the entrance hall and from it to the gate of the castle. Even the gatekeeper didn't stop him and let him out. John had a bad feeling about this as he stepped out of the castle. 10 minutes later, he returned to the castle once again. He was standing in the middle of the main hall surrounded by that gory scene. He was not caring about any of it anymore as he faced Harkon, who was sitting in the central throne in the middle of the apex of the room. Harkon looked at John with a lazy attitude, showing no emotions on his face. The vampire looked dignified from all angles, a well-trimmed beard, a pale middle-aged face, fancy clothes, glimmering gold eyes with the white of them turning red. The man can be painted and his image will sell for a crazy price. Still, none of that was in John's mind. He was more concerned with what he experienced outside the castle. "This isle, is it in Mundus?" John asked. As he got out of the castle, he didn't detect the natural law of the mortal world and felt he is in a different realm. He couldn't teleport away. "It is," Harkon replied, dismissing John's initial doubt. "And the mists around it, that is by no means natural." "It is not," Harkon confirmed. As John walked out of the castle and couldn't teleport away, he tried to walk away from the isle and it happened to be surrounded by mist. Each time he walked through the mist brought him back in front of the entrance of the castle once again. He tried hard but with no result. "Nefertiti, you hear me?" "Yes. Can you explain any of it?" "No. You are in a strange place. But the shadow world is natural. All I could see is you turning around and going back again." "I see. The mist." Nefertiti was hidden in John's shadow all the time since the time the vampires appeared until now. Even when Harkon charged at John to teleport away, John managed to pass the cube ring and the Elder Gleam branch to her. It was advantageous to have a friend in the Shadow Realm where the Daedric princes can't even see. Still, the situation was not pleasing. Shadow is not responding, and the system is unable to reach the augur. John sighed inwardly and spoke to Harkon. "So, this castle and the island, are they some sort of your area of influence?" "Domain," Harkon corrected John. "I see. Interesting." John looked around the interior of the castle that didn't resemble anything Nordic, Cyrodiilic, or even Breton. It felt like a dark fantasy old castle lit with the bare minimum amount of candles. Still, the term domain was something John never heard of in the game or read about in the book, but he could make an uneducated guess. Probably a place where Harkon has some influence on space and magicka, allowing him to practice his will in any sort of phenomenon just like that mist out there. No, wait. There was something similar if not far greater. John thought. That's right. There are the Daedric princes and their realms. The term domain may refer to a realm of influence, just like the Daedric realms to their respective princes. Applying the sense of the domain, it will mean that Harkon has an area in the world under his control too. The question now, to what extent? Full control sounds impossible, but it is the worst situation that can happen, so it shouldn't be overlooked. Always assume the worst that can happen. Harkon gave John the courtesy to collect his thoughts. He was actually not thinking of it that way. He was enjoying the sight of a mortal trying to fathom his power, which in his eyes superior to any mortal. Then he remembered something. "Boy, that woman who came at the end," Harkon spoke. "HM? You mean my grandmaster?" John replied nonchalantly, which got on the nerve of Harkon. "That woman. Who is she? Where is she from?" Harkon asked with contempt clear in his tone. The vampires around the hall read the annoyance in their lord's tone and withdrew away from his sight to the sides of the hall. John, on the other hand, was grinning back at Harkon. "My advice, don't look for her. She is more dangerous than what you think and one of 4 absurd sisters to a father who is more absurd than anyone I know. John said with a faint smile, then continued. If I were you, I'd swallow my own pride in. Before John could continue, Harkon's index finger moved, and a powerful force lifted John up the air, crashing him to the ceiling, then pulled him down, crashing him down at Harkon's feet. Surely Harkon felt better for punishing the insolent mortal. Well, that was the case until John bounced off the ground like a monkey. Hey, that was uncalled for. I was just giving my sincere advice. The situation was ridiculous. Not even those Nobel vampires would walk out of a thrashing by their lord this lively. Let's hold the matters of no importance for later. Now, I wish to know something from you, boy. Harkon returned to his previous mood right away. John felt his pained body and replied at Harkon. By all means, Lord Harkon. First, let me ask you, how do you know me? You recognized me right away back there. John smiled and thought of an answer before speaking. Hee, you were right. I always knew I'd meet you one day, but it seems like fate has brought us together sooner than I expected. I heard you mentioning about it being a bit early. Exactly. Sigh. Fate was not friendly to me, this young man, lately since I really fucked things up with the Daedra. This one on me, I know, but my old bones deserve some rest. This KSK. The Daedra are cruel taskmasters. John made a remorseful monologue. And how exactly do you know of fate? Harkon asked. Simple. I am the damn child of the damn prophecy. At least give me some damn credit, and accept that I see some weird shit in my dreams about the past, present, and the future. You know it. I wouldn't be here kept alive if I am of no use, right? Right. Harkon stood up. The Elder Scrolls. Harkon seemed amused for some reason. At first, when I heard about you 17 years ago, I didn't know your puny clan of mortals could manage to hide you right in the open. None could tell you were alive, and somehow our best seers couldn't find out the truth about your life or death. Yet here you are telling me that we have a date of fate. I wouldn't really call it a date, John interrupted, displeased by the word date. I still had that doubt that the prophesied child with 3 Elder Scrolls may not relate to the ones I am looking for, but here you are confirming it. I must admit that you are a herald of good news, boy. Harkon walked around John while speaking. Thanks, I guess. As Harkon stood behind John, he put his hand on John's shoulder and stood beside him. You and me have a lot work to do then, he said, and sat back at his throne. Where are the scrolls? John seemed unwilling to answer. Remind me again of that prophecy you are after. Tyranny of the Sun. That sounds like a good name for little John. Ha ha ha. John cracked a joke that only he could understand and continued. Let's see. Among the night's children, a dreadlord will rise. In an age of strife, when dragons return to the realm of men, darkness will mingle with light, and the night and day will be as one foot. Different to his solemn appearance, Harkon was delighted by hearing the prophecy from another. John continued. As far as I am concerned, the age of strife is upon us, and the dragons haven't shown themselves yet. Also, as the prophecy foretells, only the blood of the daughter of Coldharbour will blind the eye of the dragon. There are only 2 daughters of Coldharbour, and these are your wife and daughter. John was right, and Harkon didn't respond. How cruel. I knew you always had a lust for power, but to offer your missus and baby girl for Molagbal too. I mean, I don't want to judge since I own a bathhouse business, but we call that being cucked. John couldn't continue his words as Harkon moved his finger once again, and John was blasted away to the wall on the other side of the room. Until he learns how to use his mouth in my presence, he stays with the cattle, Harkon said to one of his attendants. John felt a bit dizzy, but he got what he wanted. Some time away from Harkon's questioning. Chapter 360, Information Gathering. So, it went rather well? Nurina was standing in front of Alf, locking her arms together and glaring. HM? You were saying something? Alf kept dismissing Nurina's constant nagging for the past hour or so. You know, not everyone is pleased with what you said, and I need to explain to them what is going on. Nurina kept demanding. Right now, They were back at Alf's hut on the mountain south of Winterhold. As Alf kept ignoring Nurina, someone else had to step in. Grandmaster, I beseech you. John is now taken by vampires, and we don't know anything. If you can just help us, we— Girl, quit talking like that, idiot. Alf spoke with annoyance as she looked at Alina. Nurina became flustered as the word idiot was clearly aimed at her. Alina herself didn't want to say anything further and kept looking between Alf and Nurina. Crazy old hag. Out with it. Nurina was already at her limit as she raised her fists only for Alina to hold at her back. Alf was coolly enjoying her dinner while watching her first and second generation apprentices make a mess. I had to go some trouble, you know. Give me some time to rest. Alf was fed up with all the noise. Not until you tell us, Nurina shouted. Tell you what? All what you know. I was just told to come and save the day. You know the usual, fix some mess here and there. Alina and Nurina tilted their heads. You were told. Nurina couldn't understand it. The only person who can tell someone like Alf around is none other than Divaith Fyr himself, and the man showed no interest in the material world for the past 200 years. Alf smiled and pointed with her head to the window. Alina and Nurina looked through to see nothing but the peak of the other mountain, whose top carried the massive shrine of Azura. Nurina flinched. The Daedra? What do they want with John? Her voice was grim. Alina too was nervous. I was told nothing. Just in exchange for some things I wanted from Oblivion. I came to help you lot. Alf said while focusing on her food. Help us? You just let John get taken. It was Alina's turn to be angry. Well, that vampire was strong and the boy wasn't my concern anyway. Whatever it is, he can go through it. The one I came to save was you lot. Us? Yes, Azura was so focused on saving that girl don't know what's her name. She even dropped her tone and spoke properly. Alf spoke with ridicule then laughed. You mean Joel? Alina asked. Yeah, sounds like the name. I also had to get you all out of there alive. Seems like the boy made quite the bargain with Azura to keep you lot safe. Wait a minute. Saving us, and especially Jelinar? What does the Daedra want this time? Nurina asked. Azura wants what is best for her followers so she can get their praise and thanks all day long. Seems like change is going to happen and the boy and the girl will be in its center. Huh. I even had to go through 13 versions of the future to save you all without any of you dying, and that's how you thank me. Alf said many important things to Fast. Change? Nurina questioned. 13 versions of the future? Alina shuddered. Yeah, that old hag can perform divinations on the future to see many possibilities of battle before she goes through with it, Nurina explained. She must have been through many futures where things went completely wrong. Exactly. That's why I said it went rather well, judging that nobody died. Alf was finally pleased. You idiot girl. You could never learn that trick. And she scolded Nurina in the end. Are you kidding me? The tonal magic, of all things? It is literally the hardest magic there is. Have some shame, woman. Nurina couldn't stand Alf putting salt on the wound. Tonal magic? Alina asked. Something you can't use unless you are a Dwemer, Sothasil, Divaith Fyr, or one of his clones. Nurina dismissed the subject right away. And you won't be able to use when you are a half-brain dimwit, Alf continued. Grr. Nurina kept growling. I'll tell you what it is. Alf said, tonal magic is not a fixed form of magic. It is a term said to describe many. As you may tell, it is a magic based on manipulating the tones of the world to create results. The only thing that idiot said right was it is indeed the hardest magic there is. Sometimes you need to make a tone to make an effect, and sometimes you need to listen to the world to see what it tells and make no mistake. Music is all around the world. Alina got the hint. Chanting magic? I can do that. Chanting? That. Well, it is a very basic form, nothing too fancy. Maybe you can show it to that dumb girl, and she may actually get some enlightenment. Alf attacked Nurina again, then continued. But that's not just it. You see, tonal magic has more than just chanting magic, such as the Ki of Akavir, which is the parent technique to the battle spirit art. the Thursdayum of Nords, which you use and abuse on daily basis, the sword singing of Redguards, which destroyed their former home continent, the green singing of Bosmare, and also the tonal architecture of the Dwemer. What I was taught is some skills of the tonal architecture. Wait, the dwarves too used the tonal magic? Of course. How do you think they dug massive cities underground? How do you think they made a metal that can withstand the passage of time for thousands of years? The dwarves may have been too educated, but they are not enigmatic like what most think. When the snow elves sought out refuge with the Dwemer blinded them so they can't learn their secrets, leading the snow elves to become today's Falmer. I see. Alina was enlightened by Alf. She looked between Nurina and Alf, feeling the difference between the two. What? Nurina was annoyed. She thinks you are an idiot too. Alf kept going. No, never. Alina defended herself right away. We strayed too far from the subject, Nurina said. Now, will John be okay on his own with vampires? I don't need tonal magic to tell that he will. The boy sounds a lot like Lord Fyr. Both are fearless when it comes to their actions and know nothing of regret. Come to think of it, both of them are two annoying philanders. Heh. Now imagine the boy coming home with a vampire girl one day. Alf laughed. John would never do that. Alina stood up flustered. To be honest, I can see him doing it so casually. Nurina thought it was possible. It sounds like him, but please, Sneeze. Cat bless, Homan. Thanks. Damn. I sneezed a lot lately. It sounds like I am Skyrim's hot topic right now, and all are talking about me. It has been a day since my meeting with Harkon, and I could take a breather away from him in the kitchen of Castle Fokihar where the human cattle live. What I needed was some space to recharge on Magicka, gather information, and devise a plan. Still, the process of gather information yielded some horrifying facts. First, I started to see how those human cattle were treated and how they were gathered, but it was all rather messed up. The vampire attack bandits and travelers to steal them as people. Those who are weak-willed can get charmed by the eyes of the vampires and turn into enthralled beings, either thralls as cannon fodder or cattle as food. With my level of power, I was already too much for the vampires, even if Harkon himself tried to use his eyes to hypnotize me. Anyway, those cattle were being used as warm blood bags, but each day, some of them actually get slaughtered like sheep by the cattle butcher to fill the blood barrels. More to that was the cattle themselves weren't aware of anything. They are all under hypnosis and follow orders blindly. The second major discovery was the 10 vampires that raided yesterday alongside Harkon are not dead. I mean, those vampires fought with Nurina, Jonrad, and Tyr, but they were obliterated by half. Then Alf showed up and killed the other half. So whatever magic it is something I don't think I can easily match. Revival or resurrection? I don't think that is the case. Something else is at play here. It seems that these 10 vampires are important in the Fokihar clan as well. I am not sure if they are the NPCs I know, but their revival seemed important to Harkon as they are the top brass after him, which brings me to the hierarchy system around the Fokihar clan. From the bottom, it starts with the cattle, the ones I am locked up with. The situation is crazy and inhumane as they are not even aware of their identities as humans anymore. I don't get that sort of treatment as I am merely a prisoner and Harkon himself can make me a thrall. The second class from the bottom is the thralls. These are not any better than the cattle and the highest class mortals can get in this clan. Just like the cattle, the thralls got their minds manipulated by the vampires, and they possess a certain ability to fight which make them useful cannon fodder. Next up are the death hounds. Skinned hounds with black bodies, red eyes, and a mean raw of teeth. The main reason why the Fokihar clan is worthless is because they are dog-loving heathens and the worst kind at that. To top it all, those death hounds are higher than the cattle and thralls in rank and devour whoever died. The higher class is the normal vampires, the ones that compose the majority of the Fokihar clan and work from guards to servants. After them come the noble vampires, the ones which are blessed by Harkon himself to become vampires and can transform into the vampire lord mode. The mean ugly mugs that attacked us. They take the high-ranking jobs in the clan from stewardship to office jobs, as if dirty vampires need that. The highest vampire class is the royal vampires, and these are Harkon as well as his wife and daughter. And that pretty much sums up the whole hellhole I am in. How do I gather information? I don't, others do it for me. How so? Well, that is a spectacular story. You see, I met that freshman vampire that called himself Jor Blackbone, a former member of the Blackbone clan. From what it seems, he is the source of my current trouble. It seems that Hilda and Jonrad have raided the Blackbone clan, and after they finished off the enemies, they became careless and spoke to each other about me when they thought no one can hear them. Lucky for me, Jor was a weasel son of a bitch who played dead. After he survived, some vampires found him and the survivors of his clan. As both are fellow Molag Bal worshippers, they were kept as cattle and sent to Fokihar. Before he gets thralled, Jor exchanged his freedom for information about me, and Harkon agreed to make him a vampire. Now, that idiot came to find me for vengeance and held my arm, then bit on it. It was really satisfying to see his fangs get broken just by trying to penetrate my skin. I am not your average human anymore, you know? Well, he tried to use the rest of his baby teeth to drink blood from my wounds directly, and I allowed it. I cut my palm and gave him a sip just for experimenting. The result was amazing. I am now at the ebon blood stage, and my blood is superior to any, not just in grade by meditating but by nature as a Dova SOS, a dragon blood. Once poor Jor took the sip, he was never the same again. Instead of me becoming a thrall, a vampire became my thrall. Now the mystery is, does this mean that I am still a human? Just kidding, of course I am not. I am human. Chapter 361. The Fourth Labor, gift on PayPal, 4 bonus. Pat/Rayon goal, +4, bonus/month. The second day, I had a visitor, and let's just say it is one very annoying visitor. Young John Hild, Priestess Urania. Just in case you are wondering, that is the very same Urania who is the priestess of Azura and the prophet of my labors. Also, in case if you are wondering how am I meeting her, then I have no idea. I am still held in a cell with the cattle of the vampires, and here I go ask her about how she got in here. How did you get in here? Clearly me asking. The guiding of Lady Azura never led me astray from where I must be it in the depth of oblivion or some vampire den. Urania replied with a haughty tone. Does this look like some vampire den to you? I think that is a proper response. I am here to inform you about your fourth labor. Fuck off. Urania was clearly bothered by my attitude, but seeing the shithole I am sitting in, it was clearly not the time to hear about the goddamn fourth labor. She cleared her throat and spoke the words of Azura. The cold march, the dragon hunt, the stone built, the old hold, and 10 suns and 10 moons. Save parents and children. I looked at Urania and had the urge to stand up and beat the ever-living shit out of her. Translation, please. Urania sighed. This is an easy one, she said. Clearly. I said so too when I heard it for the first time. Let's share our thoughts together. Me, no idea. Your turn. The cold march means an enemy is coming through the cold lands. The dragon hunt refers to the enemy's aim, which is clearly you. The stone built refers to the cities you built by stone. The old hold is clearly Winterhold. And 10 suns and 10 moons means you have 10 days. Save parents and children means that Lady Azura is worried about the safety of the Dummer populace in Winterhold. Wait, hold up a second. Say it again. I, who turned away before Urania finishes her words, looked to her direction again, only to find no one there. Fuck. Where did she? Nefertiti, did you just hear that?
Yes.
Nefertiti jumped up from my shadow and looked at me. An enemy is marching to Winterhold. Their aim is you, and they will arrive in 10 days. The people are in danger. But I got kidnapped by the vampires in front of their spies, and fuck, they won't even care about that. I see now. I arrived to a realization. It is as you think, human. You have made 2 cities from a broken hold. They think you already possess the Elder Scrolls. She read my mind correctly. Okay, what are our options? I asked. We tried greed and the Shadow World trick, but the space itself is locked by the effect of that domain thing, she said. This skeleton key is also not an option since I have no idea what am I unlocking or locking about this domain. That's not it. Even if we escaped, the vampires will come after me, and it will mean that Winterhold has to face two enemies. I said. What do we lack? She asked. Communications with Winterhold and a source of information as we are locked in a domain. We also need a way to escape, and we need a way to keep the vampires in place. I answered. Complicated. Indeed. I have every piece of equipment in the cube, and I have the space if I want to go in there and create whatever absurd machine that can blow this domain open and set me free, but I don't think that is the wise course of action. Alina gave you this. Nefertiti put her hand in the cube and took out the tree branch Alina threw at me. I looked at it and nodded. I won't mistake its energy anywhere in the world. An elder gleam branch. I was feeling its unique energy with a daze. Just how on Nirn could Alina cut out a branch with that size? The elder gleam is no ordinary tree. It is the oldest living tree possibly in the world and maybe something older than the his trees of Black Marsh. Due to the age of the elder gleam, its wood is tougher than any metal known to man. What can you do with it? A bow? Nefertiti asked. I flicked her forehead with my finger. Do I look like a damn wood elf to you? A bow? Humph. This is the highest quality wood material in the world. An elder gleam wood. The amount of energy in this twig alone is scary. I looked at the branch while Nefertiti was holding her forehead. The amount of wood in that branch can fit out anything from a bow to a spear or a staff. Hell, it can be used as a weapon just like that. But the process of crafting this wood will be near impossible. I need strong material that befits its value. Can't possible attack an iron head to an elder gleam wood and call it a spear. Sadly, I don't have material worthy of the branch. Putting that aside, I need a plan. I can start enthralling lesser vampires by my blood, but I still don't know a lot about that, and it takes time to get rid of the vampiric infection I get from them. Also, the place itself is very threatening. To what extent can that domain watch my actions? I need answers with no one knowledgeable enough to answer me. Even after asking that vampire Jor about the domain, he had no knowledge at all. All I could tell him was to act naturally and keep checking with me every now and then in case I needed anything. What about Winterhold? Nefertiti asked. Alina can handle it with the firemen's and the moonblades. Neo Sarthal may no be completely built yet, but the fortress and the walls are ready. Whatever enemy comes won't be a problem. Also, I told her about that place. That place? You mean that room. When? When she threw the branch to me, I moved my lips and I think she read them. If she finds that place, she will be able to counter whatever happens on her own. But she will be scared, Nefertiti said. Of course, but let's have faith in her. Right now, let's not sit on our butts. We have work to do. I stood up from the place I made for myself and walked through the area. This was the kitchen, the place where the cattle are kept. The vampires also come to the place frequently, so I make sure that Nefertiti stays hidden. The cattle are kept in cells and cages, and so was I, but actually there is no need to go that far. They only kept me in a cell without even locking it, knowing that I won't escape that so-called domain no matter what. I actually tried to analyze the space, but I got a very isolated feeling. It was as if this was a world of its own. I can't cast, levitate, or teleport. Neither can I reach the outside world with telepathy. This felt like the cube. I can call the cube my domain if these are the same things Harkon can do with the castle, but I doubt so. From what I also can tell, Clockwork City of Sothasil has some qualities of the domain, but still was different. Sothasil is the one who created the Haven Cube after all. If I needed to put it in theory then, domains are places where certain entities can gain a certain amount of control over the laws of the domain. The more stable the domain is, the less control people possess. Take the world for example. In Mundus, average mortals can control magicka and other forces of nature freely to a certain extent, overlooking the talent. Castle Fokihar and its Isle are a domain on their own where Harkon and his Nobel vampire can have more power while some of my powers are reduced. I get it now. A domain needs a source of power. Clockwork City had a source of power represented in Sothasil, a living god. As Sothasil fell from glory 200 years ago, Clockwork City was no longer a domain. The same goes for the Haven Cube, a subspace where I can expand it by using magicka and reshape some of its interior features. I am the source of power to the Haven Cube. The source of Mundus should be the towers, or the heart of Lorcan. That only means that Castle Fokihar has a source of power as well. With its size, I don't think it is Harkon, as he is not that powerful. Both the Haven Cube and Clockwork City are actually microscopic realms, which means things need to get magically shrunk to enter. Maybe that's the answer. A smaller domain is easier to power up. Wait, if more stable domains deny control of its residents, doesn't that mean Earth, my previous world, was stable as fuck? Possibly, right? God, now I hate being sober. Well, that was silly anyway. With the size of Castle Fokihar, it needs an outer source of power. I had no way to roam around the castle freely, neither does the lesser vampires I can enthrall. The layout is also much larger and more complicated than the game. I need an ally who grew up in this place. Hey, fuckface. I called the ugly cattle butcher. Tell your lord I can stand this torture no longer, and I am ready to cooperate, but we need to talk first. The vampire butcher saw me out of the cell and looked at me with anger. As he brought his ugly face over to me and wanted to exert some authority, I could do nothing but sigh in tiredness. Fine, fine. Show me those baby teeth. Maybe an ugly mug like you has a use in the end. Enthralling the guy in the kitchen should be of use one day, wouldn't it? Chapter 362. A List of Demands. A bonus chapter. This comes by Hiruk Barua. Sorry for making it late. 10 days until the Battle of Winterhold. John sent the cattle butcher to arrange an audience for him with Harkon. He stood in the middle of the hall once again with the same dirty clothes he went to battle the Forsworn with, and his state was still as miserable as yesterday, but he at least regained most of his magicka after a day's rest. I heard you can bear the cattle barn no longer. Did it break you in just a day? I am disappointed. Harkon spoke. Hee. Please, Lord Harkon, both you and I know that we won't be seeing each other unless you hear that. John said with a smile that got on Harkon's nerves right away. But, John continued, I have come to a realization that I should comply with your excellency until we finish our quest. You get your Elder Scrolls and I get my way. Until, then I, John Dare, will faithfully help you in the matter regarding our mutual fate. John said with a bright smile on his half-draugr face. Harkon was no fool and could clearly feel the trickery in John's tone. I don't like this. Lock him up until he starts begging for it. With a lazy deep voice, Harkon dismissed John's offer right away. Seriously? Not taking my offer? SK. Having cold feet from mortal tricks, are we now, Lord Harkon? John said with a grin. Harkon didn't withstand the insult, and in a beeline of blood mist, he charged at John with his face twisting into a bestial appearance and his claws extended over 10 inches each. John was ready and retreated 10 meters away. As he evaded Harkon's initial attack, a mace jumped from his shadow and clashed with Harkon a couple of times before the latter stops. Harkon looked at the mace meaningfully. So this is the mace of Lord Molag Bal. You were hiding it all that time? Harkon seemed not happy with the fact. Yep, what about it? This mace was given to me by Molag Bal. You want it this badly? John played with Molag's mace in front of Harkon to tease him. Harkon snorted in disdain. Humph. I had the honor of bearing it in battle once, but I don't stand a mortal carrying that weapon with no respect. Marks. Harkon ridiculed John, then called out for someone. With that call, the space twisted beside Harkon and a Dremora appeared. Unlike Zykel, this Dremora seemed capable and mighty. What is it, Harkon? Marks the Dremora spoke in his race's annoying voice. You inform me that this mortal is carrying the Lord's mace, but why is it still with him? He should never bear it. Harkon spoke. That is not for you to decide, vampire. The mortal here is the bearer of the mace, and that's final. The amount of souls he took with the mace qualifies him. Mark said. Humph. And you were told to use him wisely by Lord Molag, not to fight with him. Remember your place, Harkon. No one is pleased with your late. Leave. Harkon banished the Dremora before he says more. He then looked with cold eyes at John. Out with it, mortal. Where are the scrolls? Harkon asked. The closest one is here. John casually replied. Here. Harkon frowned. On a cosmological scale, yes. Here on Mundus, and close at that. The other one is outside Mundus. Harkon didn't seem to like John's answer and persisted further. I want an exact location. No can do. Say again. Harkon stepped towards John with anger oozing from his eyes. I can't. I know where the first scroll is, but not like exactly. Also, we'll need it to find the second. That's how things go. John said with confidence. Harkon seemed a bit amused. So you want me to send you out after the scroll? Yes. I know where to look, but I'll need you and your people to help me. If you want assurance, I'll do whatever you want. Shackle my magic or put me in chains. John put his hands together as a sign of good faith. Harkon looked at John and thought. By the look of John's heartbeats, he wasn't lying, but not completely. Well, whatever John was planning to will get crushed by his power anyway. Harkon was confident. So, let's say it once again. Your end of the bargain is for me to find your precious family along with you Elder Scrolls. Now, my end of the bargain. Here is a list of my demands. John said, forking out a paper from his pocket. The room got noisy by John's annoying boldness. The vampires around were clearly displeased. A noble vampire standing beside Harkon walked to John and snatched the paper disdainfully. He then looked at it, and his face twisted. What is it, Farron? Harkon asked. Humph, this mortal is playing something for sure. Farron Sudry, Harkon's court alchemist, handed the paper to Harkon. Harkon looked at it, then looked at John. A proper living quarters, a suitable suit of armor, and human-friendly meals. 3 per day. John smiled broadly. If I am staying in such a wonderful place, then I should make the most of it, shouldn't I? The vampires around the hall were baffled. A mortal staying in the quarters, he must be joking. Your place is among the cattle, pray. One vampire was infuriated. And he wants us to give him an armor. What next? A pet gargoyle? Another mocked. Did you hear the last one? Human food? Here? Where humans are food. Can't he do with the normal cattle fodder? A third said in disdain. Quiet. It was Harkon who quietened them. He then looked at John and narrowed his eyes as he spoke. 2 Elder Scrolls for just that? Harkon raised the paper between 2 fingers. John grinned for Harkon's sharpness. Well, the Lord of Fokihar clan surely has a hefty reward for whoever brings him the 2 Elder Scrolls he is after. By then, I am sure Lord Harkon may consider looking into my state. Vampirism can help regrowing limbs and reconstructing damaged parts, no? John was clearly referring to his face, foot, and fingers. At John's remarks, Harkon smiled. Indeed, I think you will not regret that choice. Harkon smiled and looked at his subjects. I think so too. Immortality will look good on me. John smiled brightly. My lord, I think this mortal is plotting to draw you outside and lead you that monster woman. Farron spoke with concern, referring to Alf. Don't worry about it. I won't be going out. He will be shackled and sent with Fura and Garan. Harkon said, We also will make him wear a shadow cloak to not let any hint of signal draw out. Farron bowed his head and agreed. Harkon just assigned 2 of the strongest vampire lords to act as John handlers. Fura was the vampire who stood her ground against Jonrad, and Garan is an insanely powerful mage who pressured Nerina too much during the fight. John was completely unconcerned by whatever they were thinking about. He has his own plan that most certainly does not include becoming a damn vampire. Harkon had one more warning to say. Boy, remember well? The fate of the little town you built won't be good if you decided to do anything funny. John's face almost stiffened for a second, and his tongue was about to smite down Harkon with a shout, but he calmed himself. Fine, I guess I should prepare for the journey then. John spoke up. No, you are leaving right now. Harkon seemed to be insisting. Not a problem. I'll free my schedule. John complied easily. Where is the scroll then? I hear it's calling from the Pale. John said. Fura, Garan, handle things and take the best men with you. If the mortal is not lying, then any shortcoming will be on you too. Failure is not an option. Yes, Lord Harkon, the two replied. Fura and Garan took John inside the castle. As their lord stated, John can take an armor and a pick small room before departing. At the end of the day, John and Harkon had the same smile behind their expressionless faces and the same idea in their heads. How easy, they thought. The meeting between Alf, Nurina, and Alina concluded that they should leave things for John and handle the storm that his identity conjured. It was the second day after they returned to Winterhold and things were going out of hand on a rapid scale. Everything that happened on the day of the battle was spreading across Skyrim like hot potatoes. John Dare is in truth John Hild Firemane, the fireman's cursed child that was not supposed to live, a mass killer, an evil mage, a necromancer, and was taken by the Forsworn than the vampires. By the end of the day, anyone who wanted to add more rumors about John was accepted without thinking whether it is true or false. Not only that, the battle with the vampires showed Nurina's skills as a necromancer too, and the headache was coming from every nook and cranny. The first to cause trouble were the people. Those who knew John from the beginning were helping to keep the Thane's reputation, but after the massive rise in Winterhold's population, these people were not clearly the majority anymore. The second to cause problems were the business partners. Many started freezing ties with the Dare Dragon Company, and some wanted to terminate their partnership contracts on the spot. Also, some clans that were against the firemen 17 years ago started to send threats to the company. The third party to appear were the Vigilantes of Stender. They came into Winterhold in a big team and barged in John's house when Alina was out. Jelinar, who was still not recovering, let loose of her spiders, and a massive fight happened. Alina then came in with the Jarl, then arrested the Vigils and executed their leader on the spot. The Vigil of Stender are not an evil group, but they are zealots of the god of justice. They heard that John used the undead openly and wielded what looked like a Daedric artifact that snares the souls of people. John really wasn't humble in that fight against the Forsworn. The chaos was spreading around Winterhold like a plague, and some people actually stated migrating, not wanting to stay in the den of the demon whose name is John Dare. Alina was truly swift while dealing with these problems. Any troublemakers were taken care of in various means. The migration was carried out smoothly as more of those poisonous people stay was more disadvantageous for Winterhold. The threats were replied at with threats, and the messengers were often killed. She may be a noble lady and a fine war commander, but she was no negotiator or a diplomat. These tricky stuff were left for a trickster like John. In the span of one day, Alina managed to be the brutal beauty that ruled with fear and iron. The Storm Rage crown on her head was the harbinger of demise to who angers the lady boss. To ensure that they stick together, the Firemans and the Munbalds started moving to Winterhold and keep large portions of their forces there. Together with John's company, they stand a chance against any enemies. Still, the news that frustrated Alina was how a number of the Hidden Clan have stated a meeting together to determine their relationship with the Firemans. These were the clans that helped the Thalmor chase Hilda 17 years ago. From the reports she got, some of the ones who attended the meeting were High Elves, possibly Thalmor. This was who the diplomatics went. Still, right now the house was in chaos. Hilda wasn't recovered from the shock after John's second disappearance. Johnrad was no better. Joel was getting healthier slowly, but depression got to her, and many were having a hard time. There was not much to do for Alina at the end of that night. She closed her ledgers and headed home. The words that John said to her right before he gets taken by the vampires were still vivid in memory. She felt that John was preparing something for an emergency. The hint that John left for her when she threw the branch for him led her to the vault in the basement of the house. Once she opened and saw the treasurers gathered in, she didn't bother and reached the other end of the vault. There was a light screen unusually installed on the other wall of the vault. Alina wouldn't have noticed it if she didn't know what it is or wasn't looking for anything unusual. As she examined the light screen, the screen activated and reflected the image of Alina like a mirror. Identity confirmed. Please place your palm on the screen. Alina knew the light screens have some absurd functions, but talking wasn't one of them. What are you? She asked with no response. She then decided to put her palm on the screen. Fingerprints confirmed. Welcome, Admin Alina. As your first time in the operation and planning room, you will be walked through a quick tutorial. The wall behind the light screen opened like a door to show a spiral staircase behind it going down further underground, and the vault's door was locked on its own. Please, proceed. What absurdity did John create this time? Alina felt a vibe of goosebumps go through her body. She went down the stairs and arrived at a room beneath the vault. We had a basement to our basement all along. In that room, there was a large light screen fixed on the table and a number of strange devices that were emitting magic power. Alina saw a comfortable chair in front of the central light screen, a panel with few rows of buttons, a mouse-like object. Welcome, second admin. My name is Alexa, and this is the central control room. Please, take a seat. I knew it. Alina's cheeks pouted. More of John's women I have to deal with now. Chapter 363, Beauty and the Beast. So I was supposed to be on Eid break, and I really enjoyed okay. Who am I kidding? I just slept for 2 days straight with nothing to do. T to the power of T. That's why I worked on research about Serana's age and how old are the Fokihars. I'll share it on both Reddit and at the end of the chapter. Also, this is a 4K words, research is not included, so it is a double chapter for today and the 5K votes. Anyways, Eid Mubarak. 9 days until the Battle of Winterhold. The Pale, a hold that shares borders with Winterhold from the west and the south governed by Jarl Skald the Elder. However, on the other side of the hold, there was a big secret being unearthed. John was covered by a cloak provided by the vampires of Fokihar. It was a very rare fabric called the void cloth. It gets extracted from a medium-height plant with blue stems and blue flowers called the void bloom. As hard as it is to find the plant, the extraction can be refined into threads then tailored into void cloth that has an extraordinary ability to hide presences and conceal signals. And here's the thing. Once that cloth touched John's skin, greed made an absolute mess inside the cube. It was insanely trying to jump out and devour that delicious material. Right now, John was watching the entrance of a certain cave being unearthed and sitting outside on a stone being watched by both Fura and Garan. Barely suppressing greed that was going on a rampage, John let out a few parts of the damn thing to go out and started devouring the cloak bit by bit, then replaced the eaten parts with more of greed. When greed devoured the shadow sword, Shadowrend, some time ago, it possessed the ability to understand metallic objects and reshape them like Shadowrend, which can reshape itself as well. John wouldn't miss a chance for his first deadly sin artifact that is also part of his soul to reach a higher potential. Still, to not make it noticeable, John started chatting with the 2 vampire lords next to him. Then I jumped off the building and shouted at the loudest of my voice, "Bitch, my surname is Dara," and splashed down the canal. It was a glorious day. Can this Nord stop talking? Garan was clearly annoyed by John. Don't ask me. Fura was barely holding back her irritation. Oh, that reminds me. Back in my past life. Arg. Again with that? The two couldn't hold it anymore and took distance from John. Fura started sharpening her greatsword and Garan opened a book. Oh, Commentaries on the Mysterium Xarxes by Maker Cameron. That's one rare book. John talked to Garan. You know about books? Of course, I am a mage myself. Humph. Calling yourself a mage? You Nords know nothing other than swinging your big swords like morons. Gara, originally a dark elf, talked back at John with a hint of his words directed at Fura. She paused for a second before going back again at her usual. Hey, that's one idiotic insult. I am a capable mage and also a capable warrior who can swing his big sword like a moron all day long. Just point me at a brothel and I'll show you real swordplay. You are getting on my nerves, rich boy. Fura pointed her sword at John. Oh look, you two are actually talking now. I still have that tale about dragons that I always tell about my past life. Let's see, it starts at my head. Someone stop him. John used the deadliest of his arsenal, The chatterbox technique. Inheriting the Egyptian technique that was refined through 5,000 years from days of the most ancient civilization on Earth, John made the vampires wish to stay as far away from him as they can get. By that distraction, greed has already completely taken over the void cloth cloak and started showing signs of evolving. The true nature of greed is ethereal, which led John to consider it a shadow ether, something that can be seen as matter and energy at the same time. By greed's nature, its favorite food other than John's magica is things that have a shadow nature, and that void cloth happened to be one. By devouring the cloth, greed can now morph into a fabric form. John was extremely happy with the change. Now, instead of the void cloth, greed was covering John, which meant he is free from the effect of having his magic signal blocked from reading. He also can now connect himself back to the system fully. Alexa, you there? Reconnecting 1%, 45%, 79%, 100%. Welcome back, admin. Syncing your data with the main unit. You have 4,337 notifications. Fuck. This is worse than my email back in the day. Second admin has logged in through the main unit. Second admin is now offline. Oh, Alina found it. Good. I think she found out what to do without me now. John was happy. Some time ago, he decided to make an emergency measure and disconnected himself from the augur, then put the astral extension in a device with the ability to manipulate the binary enchantments. With that, John could have his own analysis device without putting too much workload on the augur. He also can now edit his own system programming to his preferences, and the augur can access it for data whenever he wanted. He also gave Alina access to the main system unit in case anything happened. The technological advance of John's own gadgets has taken a completely sci-fi turn compared to the continent's current magical technology. With him being assured that Alina will commence his plans, John started writing a message to assure her and tell that he has a plan to escape and will be there in the span of 9 days. As he didn't have to do anything while the entrance to the cave was being unearthed, John kept sending more information about his situation to Alina, telling her what to do, and completed some important schematics for certain items. The vampires thought he was under the control of the void cloak and the magic shackles, but he had already got rid of the cloak, and the shackles were nothing but a toy in his eyes compared to his true level of power. Why is that human so silent all of a sudden? Garan noticed how silent John became. HM? Right? Hey, are you up to something? Fura shouted at John. And what? Oh, I dozed off. What were we saying? Dragons, yes. Right, the second verse of the story. Shut up. Oh, sorry. John's dumb act that was refined through years of hard work kept him clear from trouble. He kept his head under the cloak's hood and feigned sleeping. The vampire's thralls finished the work for their masters, and John took the lead in the cave. Following him were the vampire lords Garan and Fura, followed by the lesser vampires and the thralls. Being non-vampires, the thralls were used as a meat shield whenever there was a trap detected. John had no remorse for the thralls despite being humans too. This thing was that thralls were originally bandits attacked by vampires, and used to add up to the force of the vampire by being hypnotized with the vampire's eyes. Once the cavern ended and the ruins started to appear, Garan started nodding to himself. These are Nordic ruins indeed. If I am not wrong, this should be Dim Hollow Crypt. So the so-called child of prophecy was right? We'll find an elder scroll here? Fura asked. That is yet to be seen. Garan urged the team forward. Sure enough as any other Nordic tomb, the place was infested with draugrs, deadly traps, and sometimes giant spiders. John was casually moving around, navigating through Nefertiti's guiding from the shadow world. She could discover traps or enemies a day away, so the trip in the crypt was smooth. As the excavation teams spent almost half a day exploring the crypt, they finally arrived in a large room that can almost take an Olympic stadium inside it. John pointed out the traps and walked to the balcony overlooking the room. This is way better than I ever thought. Fura was amazed by the sight. The room wasn't just large, it had a deep bottom and a high ceiling. In the bottom, Water submerged the floor and a high circular platform was built. This platform had a strange architecture that can only be seen in Castle Fokihar. John walked down the balcony and crossed the bridge across the room to the platform. There is no enemies on this side of the room. What is this place? Fura asked. Here lies the Elder Scroll and another ancient vampire, John said. You sure? Only one way to find out. John looked around the circular platform that was made of dark stone and found all the key parts about it. The floor was carved in circles, and there were braziers and a small altar in the center. What now? John didn't reply as he walked to one of the thralls and dragged him by his nape to the center. The vampires frowned as they didn't like John's attitude acting out of line, but none stopped him. Anticipating what was going to happen, John held the man and carried him high with his 2 hands, then slammed him on the altar. With the impact, the altar reacted and a sharp head grew from it, skewering the thrall and draining some blood. With that, the carving on the floor started to show signs of change, and harmless purple flames appeared on them in a certain pattern. A puzzle? This should be easy, Garan said as he started thinking, but John was already solving it, which irritated the vampire. He moved the braziers to follow the trail of the purple flames, and each time the flames started to take another pattern which he had to follow. From the center to the outside back to the center, the puzzle was already solved. The floor of the platform shook, the areas around its center started to sink down. The ones standing on the edges of the platform fell from it to undefined fate, and the ones in the middle held to the ground. The central altar started to rise, showing a thick monolith under it, and the monolith's surface showed signs of opening. As John went forward to check it out, the 2 vampire lords pushed John back and stood in front of the monolith in anticipation. The cover slid open slowly, and its inside was dark, as the dim light started to illuminate the inside of the hollowed monolith. A thin figure of a black-haired maiden that almost tried to walk out of her petrified state from the inside of that monolith stumbled on her steps and tripped down powerlessly. Once she tripped and her back was exposed, everyone around could see the thing she was carrying. A cylinder object of unknown material, yet magnificent and majestic appearance. It was nothing like any and none was like. A singularity of art and piece of music, where songs and dreams are the same. A perfect yet mysterious object. The maiden groaned as she started to rise, and the object on her back hid behind her again. She stood up while staggering and examined the people around her. A dark elf man with short hair and a familiar dress, a Nord woman with a greatsword and wary expressions, a large man in a black cloak with a curious aura around him with blue eyes gleaming from under his hood, and a bunch of minor characters behind them. The people who saw the girl were gratified by her appearance. She was a verse in the law of beauty, even though she was pale and thin. Well-shaped features, beautiful arched eyes, and hints of royalty in each detail about her. Few could make people feel inferior around them, and that girl's appearance was already putting a large amount of pressure on the vampires around, without even a single hint of energy leaking from her. Who sent you? The girl spoke in a dry voice. She was having a struggle keeping her mind together with the long slumber she woke from. This you must be. Before the dark elf could say anything, a drop of blood came from above and descended down on the girl's cheek. It was from the corpse of the thrall that John used to activate the puzzle. John saw that, and his lips arched up in a smile. The girl's face started to turn. There was beauty no more. Only a savage, brutal expression appeared on her face, with a strong lust for blood tingling on all her nerves. Hundreds of years under seal and slumber would make a vampire go insane with all the thirst that comes all of a sudden from the tiniest whiff of blood, let alone a whole damn drop. As the girl's face turned, her mouth opened for her 4 long fangs to appear, and her claws extended 10 inches each. She was a wolf in a herd of sheep. All she wanted was to feed, and lo and behold, the nearest human was standing there tall and mighty behind those 2 vampires as a buffet of everything that is sweet and tasty. It felt as if he was saying, "Come at me," and indeed, he was actually saying it with his wide, insane, sadistic smile. 2 beasts of blood and insanity showed nothing but absolute interest in one another as if the world was made only for the two of them. A beast of blood and a beast of tyranny, and the other one only looked like the sweetest prey in each's eyes. John's plan was executed to perfection. Show knowledge about the place and lead the vampires by the nose. Put every piece where it should, and a single drop of blood will unleash the beast and make a river. Now to the second verse of the song, or rather, now to the dance. The girl was no longer in control. She saw the nearest human and charged at him, looking for the best place to suck his blood dry. His neck? John raised his wrist that was cuffed by the magica shackles, and the girl's open mo bid on that shackle breaking. John looked at the adorable face of the beast with a grin and blocked her claws by the shackles on the other hand. The girl's superhuman strength broke both the shackles and waved her free hand on the busy-handed John. With his magica free once again, greed, as a cloak, enveloped John and took the hit of the girl's free hands. To everyone's surprise, the supposed-to-be void cloak got shredded to 6 pieces horizontally without any resistance. The man inside the cloak was now nothing but 6 pieces cut by 5 sharp claws, but that was not the case. As soon as the cloak pieces fell down, there were no blood or flesh shreds to be witnessed. Only the cold sound of the shackles falling on the ground woke the surrounding from its daze. Everyone, including the girl, looked left and right to where John may be, only to hear footsteps from the other side across the room. The large figure was walking with ease in a mighty-looking suit of armor. It was the Fokihar Knight Armor, a modded armor John installed in his past life and found it in the armory of Castle Fokihar. It suited him like nothing else. The same design as the Fokihar vampires' dresses, with extra material of metal on the arms and vital parts, the armor was a piece of art. One of my favorites. Check it on Nexus code 80634. The girl, in her frenziness, could recognize John as a tricky prey. Not caring about all the prey around her, the vampire girl's eyes were set on no one but John. None noticed that the void cloak that was torn to 6 pieces, which was actually greed, had started crawling to John's location, and he held his hand out. Greed rose up like a living shadow and joined its owner. John then morphed greed into a jet black katana in a jet black scabbard. The tension was clear, and the girl's superior blood was suppressing vampires and thralls alike, so no one in their right mind had a speck of idea to stop her. She lowered her posture ready for a charge, and John lowered his posture with the katana at his left side being held in the Byaedo style. Byaedo style is a style that emphasizes being aware and capable of quickly drawing the sword and responding to a sudden attack. With his aura unleashed, his left hand holding the scabbard and his right hovering above the handle, John drew the sword with the girl's charge, and a collision was heard. She was on the other side behind John, and he has already drawn his sword in full. Both of them has avoided the other's attack, but looking at the girl, she was clearly tricked. John's scabbard was the real weapon all along. Once the girl passed him, the scabbard extended and stabbed the girl from behind her knee, but to no avail. She was too strong to get even injured like that. John didn't have much hope anyway. He just wanted the weakened vampire girl to exhaust her power completely. That was his goal. The girl turned around like a beast with no focus in her eyes and waved her hands left and right at John. He responded with every slash calmly and kept using the scabbard as a defensive part and sometimes offensive. The speed of their movements was insane, and only Fura and Garan were able to keep up with their eyes. Maybe the girl was still weak and the human is shockingly stronger than they thought, but the two vampires knew they shouldn't interfere in such a fast-paced battle, or they may injure themselves, or worse, injure the berserking girl. Those poor souls who were not able to get away from the scale of the fight were mercilessly cut by either John's blade or the girl's claws. John kept taking distances and sheathed the sword each time he got away to perform an Byaedo-style attack. Outwardly, he was acting cool, but inwardly he was shocked by the girl's strength. He had some standards for a noble vampire in his mind, but he found that the girl is far more powerful than just what she is capable of showing right now. Maybe lack of training or lack of food caused her to this bad at fighting. It still meant that he needs to weaken her more than he planned. He also discovered one more thing. Harkon may be an ancient vampire, but he is just another vampire lord. This girl was on a whole different level. She is an original vampire, a daughter of Cold Harbor. With the rise of John's estimation, so did his tactic. His hands started casting spells on a fast pace around the girl who seemed to be going to charge any moment. As the girl moved, she seemed to be able to see through the traps John put around her and avoided with a very unrefined footwork technique. John saw through her movements, and his thumb behind the katana's tsuka guard launched the sword like bolt towards the girl. The katana flew backward, and its kashira pommel crashed in the girl's forehead, causing her to halt for a second enough for John to arrive and kick the girl towards the traps he laid. Just as she landed on the runes, a hand made of lightning launched off and grabbed her leg. Another trap was unleashed, and another hand of lightning grabbed another limb. Each trap was actually a electro hand spell, and all caught the girl on a rapid pace. John cast his magic and empowered the traps to catch the girl in space from all four. She was kept hanged like that and started moving violently to break free, yet to no avail. John was already in control. Before he could do anything, a blade was already on his neck and 5 pairs of claws were holding him. That's enough. Fura and Garan finally got the chance to stop the fight. Took you long enough. What's the deal with the lass? John spoke. Well, it is your mess that she caught a whiff of blood. Now look around. We ran out of thralls just by your little rampage. Fura said. I wasn't the one who made such a puzzle. Now deal with her, and let's be on our way. John replied. You can't deal with her. She is not a normal vampire, Garan said. John feigned ignorance. Fura and Garan got away from John. You need to give her your blood, mortal. What? My blood? John acted angrily. My deal with Lord Harkon was for none of you fuck-faces to even put a scratch on me. Now you want my blood? A blood potion won't do with her state. We need fresh blood. If you kept one thrall alive in the fight, then we should have avoided that. Now deal with it. Return her to her right mind before her powers return with more thirst, and she kills us all. Fura said. Damn it. Despite the unwillingness he showed, it was perfectly what he wanted. He was planning for this all along. Weaken the girl both mentally and physically, eliminate any possible blood donors, then give her the blood. It won't enthrall her, but it will be enough. Enough for the next plan. John controlled the hands of lightning and pinned the girl down, then walked to her. Her monstrous face was glaring at him in frenzy. Now, all that frowning is bad for your skin. I'll give you my blood, but on my terms. No funny moves. John held the girl's face up, and with nothing but his will, a small wound opened on his palm. His blood flowed down in an unnatural form, as if he was controlling it himself. It flowed through the girl's lips down to her mouth. Slowly and carefully, John almost emptied a full liter of his own blood before the girl calms down and revert to her natural face. John dispelled traps and held the girl down. She was collapsing slowly, supported by his hands. Drenched in sweat, the berserk state must have drained her stamina a lot. John could only smile as he looked at the beautiful face of that girl. A silly idea came to his head and thought that she is both the beauty and the beast. Funny. He also considered himself a beauty and a beast. What a match. He only caressed her forehead with an unintentional grin forming on his face. Welcome home, Sir Anna. Spoilers ahead. Lore research. Is Sir Anna really 4,233 years old? Here's why I don't think so. This is based on the game events, not the novel. Mostly the one who played the game. So abandoned ship of spoilers. First reason. While she herself was taken aback by the existence of an empire in Cyrodiil. I think this shouldn't mean she is from the time before the empires of Cyrodiil, the early 240 years of the First Era. Also, according to the wiki, their empires in Cyrodiil were established and dissolved on those dates. Alessian Empire, 1E 242, 1E 2331. Reman Empire, 1E 2703, 1E 2920. Akaviri Potentate, 1E 2920, 2E 430. Septim Empire, 2E 854, 4E0. Mede Empire, 4e29 to date. We have a lot of gaps between the empires. 372 years between the Election and Reman, and 854 between Reman and Septim. I am talking about the chance that the Folkihar folk are not from the pre-Election period because, let's face it, those 242 years were very busy for Nords conquering Morrowind and High Rock with all the kings recorded, and before it was the Merethic era when the Atmarin were just arriving. Serana and her family are Nords, but the thing about them being that old, 4233, is too far-fetched. Second reason, one of the most notable vampires in Folkihar clan is Vingalmo the High Elf. He is the first person the player and Serana meet after entering Castle Folkihar together, and he recognizes Serana with the first glance. After talking with Vingalmo afterward, he mentions that he used to be a Thalmor. The Thalmor first appeared with the founding of the first Aldmeri Dominion by Queen Erin year 2e 580, right between the Reman and the Septim Empires. There was a second Aldmeri Dominion between 2e 830 and 2e 895, but that was short-lived and got crushed by Tiber Septim, and the third Aldmeri Dominion is very recent and doesn't fit Harkins being an ancient king. By that, Vingalmo should be either a remnant of the first or a survivor of the second, cutting Serana's age to either around 972 or 726. Conflict 1. Whether it is true or false, there is a strong conflict with the story of the undead dragon in the Soul Cairn, Durnavir. He claimed to be a dragon from the time when dragons fought for power and territory, and that's either the early First Era or the late prehistoric Merethic era when the dragon cult existed in Skyrim. After he traveled to the Soul Crane and met with the Ideal Masters, Durnavir was tasked with keeping Valerica imprisoned, which was a trick as both were immortals and Durnavir was doomed to serve the Ideal Masters for eternity. This conflicts with my reasons, but I think there is more to Durnavir's story than what we were told, and guess what? Dragons appeared in the Second Era. The Elder Scrolls Online newest DLC is called Elsewhere, and it is filled with dragons, so let's hope we are right about this one. By my delicate observations, I find it more satisfying to have a 900 to 700 years old damsel, ignoring what Molag Bal did, over a 4001. Don't ask me why. Of course, the Dawnguard DLC was badly written and all. I mean, 3 Elder Scrolls for a mere sunscreen prophecy, damn it. But that can't stop us from doing thirsty research on our best waifus real age. Now someone come with Ser Marin's face saying, too old. And Eid Mubarak. Chapter 364, Preparation for Battle, gift on PayPal, 4 bonus. Pat/Rayon goal, +4, bonus/month. 8 days before the Battle of Winterhold. Alina, sitting on John's central chair on the conference table, looked at the figures present around her and felt a lot of pressure from their presences. If it was only the senior executives and the department heads, then it is manageable, but there were more. On her right was her father Sigurd Moonblade, and on her left was Tormund Firemane. The Moonblades were all behind her father, and the Firemans were behind their patriarch. At the end of the table, there were the people from the company represented by Wulfur and finally Jarl Career. There was also Nurina, Julliner, Ela, and the rest. I thank you all for coming today. This is an emergency meeting that I am sure all of you have already heard. What is it about? Alina said, and the people around her nodded. She notified all those key figures this morning that she got a message from John, and there is a big update on the situation. Regarding the matter concerning John, he somehow found a way to send us a message last night. It says a lot of things regarding his situation. Tell us already, girl. Tormund urged her to hasten. He is captured by a clan of vampires called the Folkihar clan because of the prophecy, and they want him to assist them finding 2 Elder Scrolls. We already know that, Sigurd said. It is impossible for them to find anything. John said the time has not come for the scrolls to appear in the world. Nurina said, those bastards. They want to keep him until the time comes. Scotty was infuriated. Alina was silent for a while, then spoke up again. Last night, they found one. The room turned utterly silent. If a needle fell on the floor, its sound will be heard vividly because of how silent everything is. Even the space itself froze around them, and they all felt a chill through their bones. Gods. Jarl Career became drenched in cold sweat. Vampires and an Elder Scroll. What is this world falling to? Everyone else had the same question in their minds, and the answer was disaster. An Elder Scroll, everyone in the world knows what those are. No secret when it comes to the Elder Scrolls. Or the right way to put it is there is no knowledge when it comes to the Elder Scrolls. Each one of those mysterious things means something as they are artifacts of unknown origin and quantity, being simultaneously archives of historic, past, and future events. They often tell of events that require a hero to resolve them, although the scrolls themselves do not select such individuals. The Elder Scrolls exist out of space and time, which means they are not bound by any laws. They can come and disappear depending on the situation, and none can comprehend anything through them without proper methods. The thing about them was said that they exceed both Edra and Daedra, which means that neither group of the Etiada created them. The appearance of an individual related to an Elder Scroll may be normal, as it will mean that a hero will rise to vanquish evil in the future, even though it was never predicted easily before. Still, John was an anomaly among the anomalies. Not one, not two, but three. The size of such an event that may happen in the future and the power of that child will surely cause a massive change to the undercurrents throughout the continent, and many forces do not want any of that. Now as one Elder Scroll was found, it was a clear alarm that the time of chaos has arrived. As the people around woke up from their daze, they looked at Alina seeking salvation in her words. John has returned with the vampires to their castle and intends to escape within the 8 days. He seems to be under the effect of a thing called a domain and can't leave freely. He made it very clear that no one comes to save him by any means at all. This was not a request but an order. Alina said those words, and the room broke in an uproar. What does he mean, not save him? What should we do then? Wait for the rest of the scrolls to be in the hands of the vampires? Impossible! Sigurd shouted. This is outrageous. He can't order us. Tormund was infuriated too. Our hands are tied. If we don't go after him, then what are we supposed to do? Jarl Career said. Alina waited for the men to calm down, then spoke once again. Defend Winterhold. That was her answer. Everyone looked at her and tilted their heads. What do you possibly mean by that? Wulfr asked. An enemy is coming to Winterhold in the span of 8 days. Something too strong for the hold to defend against. Her words made sense and no sense at the same time. Of course an enemy was anticipated, but none of those old clans of Skyrim would dare come openly and fight against a town, let alone a hold. This means that the whole kingdom of Skyrim, if not the Empire, will retaliate. But here is the thing, the Empire is now acting low-key and trying to cut connections with Winterhold, just like how they did with Jonrad and Hilda 18 years ago. Both Jonrad and Hilda were present at the back, silently listening with rage. They anticipated this, but it seems to be more to it. According to our intel gathering partners in Solitude, Castle Duar has issued an order to not interfere with us, and the Thalmor are holding meetings with the clans. Alina said. Outrageous. They can't come openly and wage war in Skyrim. Tormund slammed the table. They can, under one condition. Someone spoke. Everyone looked towards the direction of Jarl Career, who seemed to have figured out something. Many years ago, when the Bloodhorkers were, they attacked the town when it was weak, and neither the Empire nor the kingdom retaliated to them. Do you know why? All looked at him, waiting for an answer. There was no banner, there was no time. The hour they came was the hour they left. What they did was overwhelming Winterhold so fast that none had the time to pick up arms. Afterward, none could pin the crime on them. No one had any evidence. If they want to attack us, then they should do it that way, or the world itself will be after them. Jarl Career was right. An attack that sweeps over Winterhold City and Neo-Sarthal Fort like nothing means to use an absolute brute force. The meaning of this was an imminent disaster approaching. With Career's explanation and Alina news about the Elder Scroll, this was pretty much a disaster. How did John find out? Wulfr asked. Alina smiled bitterly. She was about to drop another bomb to answer that question. The Daedric Prince Azura. Those who felt their heads go numb from the 2 previous pieces of information were slapped so hard that they jumped out of their chairs. Azura. Narina was frozen the moment she heard the word. The old gods? Why are the Daedra involved in this? Jord asked Alina. Alina smiled bitterly and looked at the light screen at her hand that contained John's message. There is that thing called the labor, a series of trials set by the Daedra for mortals to atone or serve a certain purpose. Alina said. The room became silent. It is the sport of the Daedra, Narina said. Something they do to pass time with or achieve a certain goal. Her voice was shaking as she said so. The word Daedra was the reason John had to hide many things from Narina, as she didn't cope with the word Daedra well. I labored once, Jonrad said. Everyone turned to look at him. What are you talking about? Even Hilda, who was all silent, asked. After we separated, I made a deal with the Daedric Prince Bothia to save my own hide, came across my friend Glimmet in High Rock, and followed him around for a labor regarding the Dark Brotherhood. Nothing I wish to remember. The history with the Daedra and the family seemed to be deeper than what anyone could think of. What about John? Which Daedra is he laboring for, and how many labors has he fulfilled? Jonrad asked. John is laboring for Azura. He fulfilled 3 labors. The first was to save a laborer and his friend John Battleborn from Shiagarath. The second was to save Wulfur from the Forsworn, and the third, seemed to have involved Molagbal, was to massacre the Forsworn to remove a certain curse they put on him. It was clearly the reason why he had to do, that torture. Alina was referring to the Blood Eagle ritual that John performed. The names of Azura, Shiagarath, and Molagbal were enough to call it a day for all the people around. Narina held her head and started growling. It is all coming over again, right? It is coming after me again. She seemed to be distressed. Fear not about John, for he is capable of dealing with things none of you are. A soothing voice echoed in the room. It was Jellinar, who was seated on her chair and seemed to be recovering slowly. She continued. Vermina and her realm didn't stop him from fishing us from oblivion. Person could not turn him into a creature of the hunt, and Hermias Mora couldn't swallow him through his books. If it is Azura, then nothing to worry about shall come. All looked at Jellinar with a dubious look. Ever since she started recovering, her mind was not normally with her. She would sleep and dream a lot about roses and cities that never existed in this world. None could understand what is going with her, but she was actually very healthy. In that mystic state of hers, she would say words and foresee things outside the perception of normal people. Being a little appeased, gazes turned back to Alina again. This was all regarding John. We will have to come up with countermeasures for a bitter defensive battle. She said. What are your thoughts? Her father asked her, knowing his daughter's knack for battles. Winterhold is a tough hold, and our position is advantageous. From the north, none can face the Dare fleet anymore. From the south, Ulfric won't let anyone pass, let alone the Imperial fort, and the long way under the mountain is a suicide for an army to march on, as we can rain them with rocks all along the mountain range. From the east, we have an exposed wasteland that they can never use for battle. This leaves the west as the only battlefield available in Winterhold, and the place where Neo-Sarthal was positioned to protect. This is where they will swarm from. We expect voice masters and Thalmor mages rather than siege engines. The numbers of the enemy are a bit out of our estimations, but we can guess that they will be more 10,000 if they want to take us in a full swoop. The company has its forces, which are publicly estimated as 1,000 trooper, and both the Firemans and the Moonblades are expected to be 2,000 at most. The Hold Guards are around 2,000, but we can only muster 1,000. This makes the total 4,000. Alina's initial estimation was bleak. Everyone knows that the Dare Dragon Company is hoarding soldiers, and Alina hid the number, which reaches 5,000 trooper. The true estimation should be 8,000 against 10,000. The odds seemed fair, but that was not completely true. A lot of hidden beasts were in the clans, and the Thalmor will sure send a force with the power to rival all the masters of the Firemans, the Moonblades, and the Dare Dragon Company. It was a hot mess for sure. This means... Tormund looked at Sigurd. No, we are not. Sigurd jumped up. Father. Alina interrupted Sigurd. You have to. What they were talking about was the Moonblades abandoning their fort, which was a mountain on the west of Winterhold. If they got besieged in their ancestral home, then a disaster will strike the great clan. Alina, this is our ancestors' home. Your mother, Sigurd said. Father, I am sure the Dade can't be honored if we do not keep living. Staying home is a suicide. You should retreat with all the clan to Sarthal. Our sacred grounds is Mount Anther, so this means we can defend where Mother and the rest are buried, right? Sigurd seemed depressed, but Alina was right. The dead can't be remembered if no living was left. Alina sighed and stood. John has a plan. Alina spoke and turned her light screen. There was a 3D image of a city that seemed like Neo-Sarthal, but it was fully built. This is Neo-Sarthal. The fort is complete and 2 layers of walls are fully built, but that wouldn't be much. The true power of Neo-Sarthal is this thing. Alina pointed at a tower in the center of the city. A tower? John wanted to build something like that? Wolfer asked. According to the things John said, this might be our hope for victory. He called it the Tower of Music. Chapter 365, The Unfortunate Dremora. 7 days until the Battle of Winterhold. For a full day after his return, John was locked up in the room he picked by the orders of Harkon. It seems an old father wanted a reunion with his daughter alone, away from distractions, especially a John-level distraction. John couldn't hide his worry alone in the room. He may have some agents among the vampires, but he needed to go forward with the plan fast. Getting delayed for a full day was not in his calculations. Still, he started working on his own projects in the time being. As he can log into the system now and can freely access the cube, he started seeing what he needed to escape. Other than Molag's mace, which had no big effect on undead, there was the Wabbajack, which John wasn't going to rely on against the vampires, and there was the Skull of Corruption, which was also useless because vampires rarely sleep in their coffins. He sat on the floor of the empty room and started massaging the place where his left foot should have been, as well as the couple of fingers he lost, and then applied the ointment on his face, which wasn't going to heal more than that. John sighed as he was sure that the damage has long since got imprinted on his astral body. He can just try to reconstruct it later. Or maybe add a pair of wings to his astral body so they grow on his real body. No, bad idea. Maybe morph into a cat? Nope, he is still an unworthy human. He could only pass boredom by going through his research on the Eldergleam branch and what he should use it for. Nefertiti would come out every now and then to distract him, and he keeps stroking her until he suddenly had a good idea. Zykil. John called for the Dremora. The call should have been enough to summon Zykil, but the Daedra seemed not responsive. John had left a blood tag on Zykil, so he used Conjure Dremora on the tag directly. Space distorted and Zykil appeared. He was wearing a cheap armor and holding a spear. Mortal? What do you want? Unsummon me now. Have you lost your brain, shithead? How dare you talk to me that way? John gave Zykil the tyrant aura to finally get a taste for the first time. Zykil started trembling in his place. Mortal. No one told me you are this powerful. Of course, wasn't my power sealed, you shit for brain? John cussed at the Dremora like his usual and then turned serious. Hey, got some questions for you. What do you want? I am really busy. Busy? Doing what? I am supposed to be on guard duty around the Tower of Lies. If Martinez Marks showed up and found that I am absent, I won't hear the end of it. Zykil looked terrified. Marks? That buff guy that looks like a blue Darth Maul? John asked. Huh. I was mistaken a few chapters ago when I described the Dremora of Cold Harbor as red and black, while they are actually bluish cyan. Now that I think about it, all of you Dremora look exactly like Darth Maul. Forgot about it. I wanted to ask you about that. Soul Sigil Stone, do you still have it? John said. What? Why are you asking? Answer, shithead. Of course not. How can someone with my rank be allowed to keep a sigil stone, you dim-witted mortal? John and Nefertiti gave Zykil the same expressionless stare. Wrong answer. With a wave of her paw, a shadow boomerang was shot by Nefertiti and beheaded Zykil. Oblivion, Cold Harbor. The dreadful Oblivion Plain of Cold Harbor is a place of death, despair, and infinite cruelty. It is ruled by Molagbal, the lord of brutality and domination, a Daedric prince dedicated to enslaving all the mortals of Nirn. The realm is nothing but a gloomy wasteland of dead forests, dark skies, endless ruins, massive fortresses, azure plasm pools, as well as hordes of evil Daedric creatures and soul-shriven slaves. The azure plasm is a substance that forms rivers and lakes around Cold Harbor. This plasm was, in fact, the chaotic creatia of Cold Harbor, where the Daedra that died reformed from. Just like the realm, the azure-colored substance reflected the theme color of the gloomy Cold Harbor, a place of torture and suffer where the soul-shriven and any mortal who dares to steps in are mercilessly butchered by the Daedric creatures around. In a certain azure plasm pool around the Tower of Lies, a certain popping sound was heard and a figure crawled out of it which seemed to be a Draymora Kinvil. Damn you mortal, and that black animal. They are on my list, damn it. Kinvil is the third rank from below, only superior to Churl and Caitiff in the Draymora community. Churls, Caitiffs, and Kinvils are basically foot soldiers, elites, and knights. The higher ranks are the officer-like ranks, the Kinreeve and Kinmarcher. These can be viewed as captains and marshals. The highest ranks are the lord ranks, the Markinaz and the Valkinaz, which are the nobles and the royal guards. The Kinvil that walked out of the azure plasm pool was the head of the guard on the outskirts of the Tower of Lies, where the mortal slaves come to mine until they become defective. The Kinvil walked in a gloomy mood, trying to figure his way back to his post. The thing with the Draymora was their terrible sense of direction, and how it is hard for them to navigate easily. While walking quietly to not attract attention, a voice called for the Kinvil. Kinvil. The Kinvil froze in his place and looked backward slowly to the mighty Draymora that approached him. Kinreeve Verkerl. So, Zykil. The Kinreeve snorted. Straying from your post when on duty again? It's the Scathe Pits for you, my lad. Kinvil Zykil jumped from his place. But, Kinreeve, I couldn't help it. I was summoned to Nirn by a mortal. The Kinreeve's face twisted in a mean smile and smacked the Kinvil on the back. And that'll be an extra shift scathing for telling such a hornless lie. Also, Markinaz Marks was looking for you, so the scathing will be after that. Now march, Zykil, march. Left, 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 right, left. Zykil couldn't help but follow Kinreeve Verkerl that usually bullied him. The thing with Zykil was that he was not the brightest Draymor, even among the low ranks, which made him quite the popular target for bullying. More than a month ago, when Lord Molagbal issued an assignment for Markinaz Marks to send someone to babysit a mortal in Nirn, most of the Draymora managed to pin the task on the unfortunate Kinvil. That's how Zykil was thrown into the clutches of John Dare, the keeper of the Lord's Mace. Being unfortunate enough to follow a mortal, Zykil was tormented day and night. It was normal for those Draymora who fall into a conjuration accident and get bound by a mortal mage. They become a laughing stock for days. Zykil was one of the popular Draymora in the conjuration accident. When he was created for the first time about 200 years ago, he was conjured not long after he became a proper churl. He still remembers the scene of the dark elf child that conjured him and how he was broken in a flick of a finger. That shorty dark elf child stood so proud of herself and pointed at the Draymora with her staff shouting, "Submit, foul Daedra. You are in the presence of the great Nerina Arin." The shame and bitterness which that day brought to him were unspeakable. Another dark elf woman appeared and started teaching the child how to torture the Draymora if they did not submit. In front of the child, the Draymora may have managed to put some resistance, but the woman broke him to pieces. It was one of the saddest moments of his life. Zykil couldn't help but growl inside. The dark elf woman and child, Kinreeve Verkerl, the mortal John Dare, and his cat. All of you sorry people are on my list. Huh. Even that bastard Marks. Markinaz or not, he is also on the list. As Zykil was marching in bitterness, he started to feel a certain tingling in his horns and toes. Oh no. Zykil knew what was happening. He could hear that voice in his head calling him back to Nirn, saying something like, "Round 2? Before Zykel could react, the void enveloped him and he disappeared in his place. Kinri Verkerl looked behind him to not find a single trace of Zykel. Haha, sneaking away, huh? I think we will need more than just a scathing pit, Zykel. Nirn, Castle Fokihar. My daughter, I trust that you had a tough time waking up yesterday. Do you feel well now? In a certain chamber in Castle Fokihar, Lord Harkon had a one-sided conversation with a certain girl who sat on a chair holding to a goblet filled with high-quality blood. She sipped on it slowly and enjoyed the taste. Yes, father. I feel well. Fine. For the scroll's safe return and yours, I wish that your treacherous mother would be here to see this reunion, Harkon said as he patted on the Elder Scroll of the Sun. Ever since the return of his daughter Serana, Lord Harkon was more lively than ever, if the word lively was fitting to describe a vampire. He took hold of the Elder Scroll and kept looking to its mystic patterns. Something about the Elder Scrolls was mind-soothing and calming when looking at its exterior, one of the mysteries that a few could understand. Lord Harkon was surely drawn with all his senses to the Elder Scroll as he sat to the opposite chair to his daughter. She looked at him meaningfully before looking away again. So, quite the time, huh? She said. Yes, quite the time. Harkon replied with no focus. Serana's eyes looked scanned around her room with a nostalgic look. Something was annoyingly familiar, as if no time has passed in this place. It should be reassuring that not much has changed in the span of the centuries she spent under seal, but knowing that nothing has changed just got to her head right away. Nothing changed in the inn. The same castle, the same blood, the same system of her father and his underlings. It was as if she went asleep in her coffin at day and woke up the next night. Her mind kept searching for any changes, from the same obsessions of her father about the prophecy that ruined her family to the stubbornness of her mother, who stood against the prophecy, to her own situation between the pulling and pushing between her mother and father. Why would anything change? No, there was that anomaly that made Serana wonder. Why is there a mortal living in the quarters and not in the cattle pen? Since when do we allow mortals to stay in the quarters? She asked. Harkon seemed annoyed by her questions and looked towards her for a second to gather his thoughts. Oh, the mortal, right? He is a helper, someone with the ability to find my Elder Scrolls. He was the one who located you. A bit irritating, but he will be taught his place after he is of no use, of course, after he laid his dirty hands on you. So, that's how it was. Serana thought. A mortal that can find Elder Scrolls? Mother said that the scrolls can't be tracked by normal means and no magic can affect them. How is that possible? Tracking an Elder Scroll? She asked. Some sort of a prophecy, Harkon said with annoyance. A frown appeared on Serana's face as she looked to her father. Another child of prophecy? Another? Harkon averted his eyes from the scroll to check his daughter's change of mood. He understood right away. Yes, another one like you, actually, not like you. He is a mortal and you are my child. You are destined for greatness, daughter. Harkon was a lousy liar only because he doesn't even bother putting any effort when lying. His age and status made him disregard any worry about telling or not telling the truth. A level of self-importance that can be irritating like none other. The deal with Serana and the child of prophecy thing is that she was always that told those words by her father. He relied on her solely to complete the prophecy of the sun's tyranny, as only the blood of a daughter of Coldharbour will blind the eye of the dragon. Hearing that another child of prophecy is around made her quite irritated for a reason. The father of hers who would see anything for the sake of power have found another pawn for his play. So, you are not changing him into a vampire? She asked. I will eventually. His kind needs to learn some manners first, or we will have another troublemaker in the court. He is also wielding the mace of Lord Molag Bal. Something about him that just, never mind. I should leave you to rest. Harkon seemed to not be able to find any peace besides Serana to examine the scroll. He simply took it and walked away. Father, Serana called. I found the way to Mather's lab blocked with rubble. Is there any? And I rather if it stays that way. Harkon cut her words. He looked annoyed as he looked back at his daughter. Your mother took what I value the most and abandoned this place. I don't even care about her as long as I can get back what is dear to me. He then left and closed the door behind him. She was left alone with the sweet taste of blood in her mouth, getting spoiled by the bitterness of her mood. He said what he values the most was taken from him, but then he said that what is dear to him is still not back. Of course. How could she think of it any other way? Aren't everyone are just means to an end in the grand scheme of things? Serana was urged up on her feet by nothing other than the mere force of annoyance. She just stood up with ragged breath and an agonizing storm of negative emotions. She, who was kept behind closed doors all her life as the princess of Clan Fokihar, could do nothing but be what her elders wanted her to be. A protected child? Okay. A child of prophecy? Okay. A mean to topple the world's order upside down? Okay. Get sealed for hundreds of years? Okay. And now what? She had nothing to do but to wait for another ordeal to be put in the center off. Cooling of her head with a sigh and a sip of blood, Serana decided to at least have a walk in the castle and see if there is anything to do now that the laboratory was sealed. Her room was close to the main hall as she could see it through the balcony after her room. The walked slowly begging for something interesting to appear, and it was not her sight by her ears that picked something. A strange, undefined, fast-paced, incomprehensible music. She walked to the direction of the sound and arrived at a room at the end of the quarter's hallway. There was not just music, but also the sound of bashing and screaming, yet it was blocked by that music. Serana opened the door and looked in. 3 pairs of eyes turned to her. A human, a large cat, and a Draymora. A rather unusual group were in a rather comical situation. The Draymora was hanged by its arms by some black chains held by the large cat, while the human was punching him as some sort of interrogation or torture. Oh, sorry for the mess. The human stopped the music and turned to the girl while cleaning his hands with a towel. She looked at the aura around him, and something was rather curious or tasty. You must be Serana. I am John. He smiled to the girl brightly and offered a handshake. As she awkwardly shook his hand, he spoke once again. Now you must be thinking, this is that situation when an easygoing, confident, adventurous red-haired boy stumbled upon a castle of an ancient vampire lord whose daughter is a gentle, smart, curious black-haired girl. Then you are right, except for the part about this being a hotel. I don't think Uncle Dracula out there is open for guests. I mean, Hotel Fokihar? Now that I say it out loud, it doesn't sound that bad, don't you think? Chapter 366. Think he'll hold a grudge? 6 days until the Battle of Winterhold. 2 chairs, 1 room. A Draymora hanged from the wall by a cat, a vampire girl, and a human boy. Weird, right? Yeah. The boy and the girl looked at each other. The boy was not that curious, but the girl was trying to point something out about the boy. Something clearly unusual. Is it the face? The boy pointed to the left side of his face. I know it is a bit damaged, but is it what is bothering you? Wah? No. I mean, you look much better than lesser vampires. Oh, good. So is it how handsome I am? The boy pointed to the undamaged side of his face. No. You look good though despite, the damage. Oh, thanks. So, is it my choice of music? I like Mozart whenever I am torturing someone. Actually, I like Mozart whenever I am doing anything. I'll pretend I know what is that. Good call. So, to what do we owe the pleasure? Noting, actually, I just wanted to see you. Father said you are the one who located me, in one day. I was just checking about you. You managed to find the other Elder Scroll? John looked at the eyes of Serana and hummed. I see. No, not at all. Oh, I was thinking that I will find your mother as fast as I found you. You don't want that? John asked. Serana started avoiding eye contact and looked for words to say. You are afraid, or maybe angry. John kept going. What your mother did. What your mother and father will do when they see each other. How this is going to affect you. I get it. You are scared of the future. Sarana stopped avoiding eye contact and looked at John. I would choose my words rather carefully if I were you. Oh, scary. I beat you once. I don't mind doing it again. John said with a grin. Now enough with mind games. Let's talk about real business. She felt a bit bitter under his gaze, but it wasn't that bad. His words made absolute sense, as if there was some strange effect on her. What is there to talk about? Your business is with my father. Oh, but you are wrong, cute little fangs. My real business is with no one here other than you. Cute little fangs? You are totally missing the point here. No, I am taking it one at a time. Sarana started to get annoyed. And what business can you have with someone you met for the first time? Simple. John pulled the chair closer to Sarana. I need your help and you need mine. Help? Exactly. What kind of help? As I said, the kind you need, John said and explained. You don't want me to find your mother, right? I can do that. Sarana looked to John right in the eye. Are you aware of what you are saying? Very. This is why I picked this room, for example. It is the room with the least amount of gargoyles stationed around, which means your father, the lord of this domain, can't fully spy on us. Sarana jumped from her chair and backed away. What are you? Why do you know too many things? She wasn't feeling okay in front of John. You know about how I feel, about my mother, and you know that my father watches everything in the castle by the gargoyles? She thought he was just a capable human with high fighting abilities that she can surpass when her powers are fully stable, but that was not the case. Something was not right. More than that, she was trying to feel threatened. She couldn't get it. There was a limiter to his danger sense around John, a suppressor, something making her less wary of him. A seduction? Seducing a vampire? Was that even possible? She felt it. She heard that he was impossible to be enthralled for some reason, even when her father tried to do it. Maybe it was the effect of the prophecy of his, or maybe he was the keeper of the mace of Molag Bal, but that wasn't the case as it seemed. He has an influence that is even higher than a vampire lord. Impossible. When did it even happen? John saw the confusion on her face and stood up, took his chair back, sat down and pointed for her to sit. You see, I am not really into vampirism or any of that. Just like you, I want out of this mess. He said. You don't want to be a vampire. But the deal between you and father was, you help him and you become one of us. John shook his head. The thing is about me is I cultivate my essence energy, which is located in the soul, so I can get more powerful both physically and magically. Vampirism takes the essence energy of the soul and trades it with another kind of energy from the patron of all vampires, Molag Bal. To cure vampirism, one needs a black soul gem which contains the essence of a normal mortal and switches that essence with the vampiric essence, which makes the vampirism go away. The thing about me is that if I became a vampire, I will lose all the essence that I cultivated so far, and that includes the power that comes with it. I will be rendered useless if I ever become a vampire. On the other hand, I am forced to find the other Elder Scroll for your father, then become a vampire, else he will kill me as he trusts no mortals. You see my options now? John explained his situation for Sarana. She nodded her head and sat back on the chair. Now, cute little fangs, you are the only one that can help me, and that's why I found you in the span of one day. If you don't want your mother to be found, then you should help me get out of here. It was a fair deal. Help him get out and buy some time for yourself to get ready for whatever storm comes at your family. Sarana kept thinking of her situation, and to be honest with herself, she would rather not trust John, but putting her father on the other side was the whole gist of this situation. She loved her family despite everything, but going further down the path of the prophecy will ruin the little that is left. The man in front of her can accelerate the ruin, and her father has a leverage on him, getting him trapped in his domain. Helping the man meant betraying her father, and the opposite meant ruining everything. I don't know how I can help, she said. I don't have any idea how to get you out if my father doesn't want to get you out. She looked depressed and helpless. Not only she was cooperating to betray her father, but she was also being manipulated by that man somehow, and she is not fighting it. For some reason, the situation was too uncomfortable. "Remember what I said?" John spoke. She looked at him, wondering what he meant. "I said I need your help and you need mine. We are in this together, cute little fangs." John approached her once again and held her hand. "You see, I have a particular set of skills that I can use. For example, I am good at analyzing space, and that's how I found that your father is watching and listening through the gargoyle status scattered around the castle. Sun Tzu said, 'Know thy enemy, know thyself. In 100 battles you will never be in peril,'" John said with a smile as he rested his back to the chair. Sarana thought of the words for a bit and nodded. "Now, your father will summon me at the end of this day when he is done flirting with the Elder Scroll we just gave him. Before he does that, I need to be ready. Tell me all you know about a domain and I promise you that I will prevent your father from doing that tyranny of the sun prophecy thing." Sarana looked at John and smiled bitterly. "If the domain is what you are worried about, then you are still not getting what kind of situation you are in here at all." After she said that, she started explaining what the domain is. John's jaw could drop no further than what it already did. The truth slapped him in the face way too hard this time. "I guess I should give you some time to process all that, and please know that I don't have that much hope in facing my father anyway." She said so, and got out of the room, leaving the stunned John behind. It was not an hour later to John's meeting with Sarana that he got summoned to Harkon's hall. "Mortal, you promised and delivered. Good job." Harkon stood up and looked at John closely. "For returning the Elder Scroll and my daughter to me, I can never thank you enough, but as we agreed, your reward will come after you find my other Elder Scrolls," Harkon said as he smiled coldly at John. "Scrolls?" John tilted his head. "Our deal was to get you one more Elder Scroll, the one your wife hid." Harkon nodded with a hint of self-confidence and scanned the vampires around him. "As you can see, I have come to the conclusion that the 3 Elder Scrolls you were prophesied with are all important. Having 3 is better than having 2, and in the end, it changes nothing. You are becoming one of us after this is over, right?" Harkon smiled at John with greed appearing in his eyes. "Yes, you are right." John nodded and looked at the one seated next to Harkon, Sarana. She seemed troubled in regards to her father's attitude. Harkon noticed the look between them and smiled slyly. "As for the 3rd Elder Scroll that we didn't agree on prior to this conversation, I will offer you a more befitting reward." Harkon pointed to the seat next to Sarana's on the other side. John and Sarana. "No." Everyone in the room blinked. This was clear as day. Harkon was using his daughter as a bargaining chip to keep control over both her and John. John's didn't change, and he kept looking at Harkon without saying anything, but it was Sarana's expressions that became sunken. She was being used again. The infuriating feeling about being seen as a bargaining chip was unbearable. On the other hand, many other vampires were looking at John with murderous glares. He didn't even join the court of Lord Harkon and is clearly immortal, yet that prey is being offered the seat next to the Lord's daughter. It was blasphemy in their eyes. Still, John could find the yellow smile fitting for the situation. "I guess I will take you for your offer, Lord Harkon." That's how he replied. "Splendid." Harkon replied, "Now, how do we find the next Elder Scroll?" "Not here." The reply rendered people speechless. "Not here?" Harkon questioned. "On a cosmological scale, yes." "Ah, I see. That again." First time when John answered that question, he said here, referring to the mortal world, Mundus. "So?" Harkon questioned. "Clearly in Oblivion." "Oh, fine then." Harkon seemed oddly understanding. "Do you know where exactly? Don't you remember that I once said we met a little bit too early? Well, as you see, I need some sort of sign that is supposed to come in the future. The only thing we can do now is either sit tight and wait for that future, or go turn every rock in Oblivion." What John said didn't make only Harkon and his vampires question his sanity, but Sarana as well. Turn every rock in Oblivion? Oblivion refers to the myriad realms of chaos ruled by the Daedra, or not ruled by the Daedra. Last time someone bothered about counting those realms has reached 37,000. John was saying that Harkon should go and turn every rock in 39,000 different worlds. Certainly, there were nicer ways to say go fuck yourself, yet John said it with a very natural face. Still, the person who recovered from that statement first was Harkon. Interesting, he said as he rested his back to his seat with a wide smile. I think I have a solution to this situation. John furrowed his brows, trying to get what diabolical solution or torture method this vampire lord came up with. Harkon walked away from the hall, leaving everyone behind waiting in silence. John felt bad about the situation, especially when Serana started covering her forehead with her palm. Human, something is changing. Nefertiti detected some changes in the space around the domain, and John raised guard immediately. He looked around, but the vampires were smiling at him with a laid-back attitude. He felt the space and void around him turn in circles, and a sudden urge to puke struck him. His head started spinning, and his breathing became haggard. 10 minutes like that, and finally everything turned normal. What happened? What is going on? John asked. The answer came right from Serana. Follow me. She stood up and walked through the hall. John followed her, and soon all the vampires stood up and followed too. As they walked through the entrance hallway and walked through the gate, John could see the changes that happened clearly. There was none of that mist that trapped him in the castle. Instead, the island was clearly visible. The water around the island was no ordinary water. It was something like a blue, jelly-glowing water that radiates like fluorescent. The sky was azure dark, and the air was sickly foul. This was no longer the place that John knew from the game. Reality had a totally different story to tell. Harkon appeared behind John and walked past him to stand in front of everyone. In Tower of Lies, there is that device called the transliminal scanner, used by the Daedra to scan the worlds around the infralix pseudocortex of Cold Harbor. We can borrow that, Harkon said with no worry at all. With a faint smile, Harkon walked back in the castle followed by his vampires, and only John and Serana were left out. A series of realization was stunning John by the second. All the things that Serana said about the domain were not even close to reality. The domain is a realm of power, a pocket reality, a place where the authority over Magicka belongs to a certain person. What John overlooked in her long explanation was the fact that Castle Fokihar was a realm that had the ability to travel to oblivion, specifically, a pocket realm of Cold Harbor. In his daze, Serana approached him and spoke quietly. So, any plan? She spoke out of agony that her father was willing to trade her for one more Elder Scroll. She was not comfortable with that sort of treatment anymore. John closed his mouth and stared around him and looked at her. We can eat shit for a starter, John said with a remorseful tone. Or we can try an acquaintance that I was just torturing this morning. You think he'll hold a grudge? Chapter 367, Blood Attack, 5-day until the Battle of Winterhold. If someone asked about an island with the ability to travel from Nirn to Oblivion, they would totally be seen as crazy people, but John realized the fact quickly. This is not the first island to have a function like that. The Isle of Artium, where the Psijic Order resides, has the same function. It can travel between Nirn and another dimension for sure. It was always rumored that the island has disappeared, and appeared many times before, so it was not impossible for other islands to have some similar function. A domain. The world is becoming more of a mystery by the day. Right now, what John knows about domains is the following. 1. They are places where the Magicka itself is under the control of the domain master, which means the domain master can do really absurd things inside his domain. 2. The domain master has a wide variety of abilities inside his domain, and that includes teleportation and empowerment. 3. Domains can travel through space to other realms they are connected to. Despite knowing that, John still felt a lot of unease. Having a domain means being a demigod in a certain limited area, but what else is there? It is impossible to think that Harkon can control his domain to the same extent as the Psijic Order. Why? It is very obvious that there are independent domains like Clockwork City and subdomains like Folkyhar, all which seems to be drawing power from Cold Harbor. Also, if the domains and the Daedric realms were compared, one won't find them that different. The only difference is that realms of the Daedric princes can be reshaped according to their wills, like making it rain, moving the winds, etc. John didn't even stop there. He already brainstormed in his head and arrived to a theory. He called it the domain chain theory. The theory indicates that every domain or realm are connected as, say, there are three main domains in the universe. These are Mundus, the mortal world, Oblivion, the chaos world, and Aetherius, the immortal world. Those three worlds form what is known as the Orbis, the universe. Mundus has subdomains which are Nirn, Akatosh, Kinnereth, Mara, etc. Nirn also has subdomains which, for example, can be any domain created on it, like Clockwork City, for example. All of that applies to the other realms like Aetherius and its subdomains Sovngarde, Sands Beyond the Stars, and Far Shores. Daedric realms like Cold Harbor and its pocket realms, and Folkyhar Castle too. Now here comes the interesting part, which John noticed a long time ago. The lesser the seniority of the domain or realm, the more freedom of controlling magicka can be used. This last part is a bit tricky and depends on the domain master, but as that person is granted access to a whole new level of control, he or she can also give the access to another. As say Harkon can give Serana the same power level inside his domain, but he is a bastard and trusts no one. So, the lesser the domain, the higher the access to magicka. The more senior the domain, the lesser the access to magicka. This can be translated by the stability of space. As said, every domain should have its source of power, and here when it varies. The power sources of the Daedric realms is known to be their Daedric princes. The source of power for Nirn is thought to be the heart of Lorcan. This means that power sources can either be an Ada, immortal, or power core. If it is this way, then Castle Folkyhar must have a power core that draws energy from Cold Harbor. There can be no other way. John closed his note and sighed. Currently, he was in his room putting an escape plan and researching the nature of the domain he is in. Some time ago, Harkon sent a team of vampires in Cold Harbor to bring a device called the transliminal scanner. If it is any other day, John would have had a heart attack if someone brought him a transliminal scanner. But he wasn't in the mood to do anything at the moment. What brought more to his problems was the fact that Zykel died from bleeding out yesterday, and he can't summon him again for some reason. This made a hole in John's plan, but he wasn't sure if he can rely on a Dremora in its home realm in the first place. Still, he at least needed to let some of his frustration on anything. Patting Nefertiti can cure cancer as far as he could tell, but she was taking a nap, and if bothering her, he would end up with a lot of scratches later on. John took the cube and started searching for anything useful. His senses reached the containment chests where one of them is still shaking. It was none other than the Briarheart blood vine that annoyed him for almost 3 months. John smiled wickedly and pulled the containment chest out with a table and some torture tools. Carefully, he took the vine out, which started to wiggle and struggle to break free, bearing its thorns towards John and trying to attack him again. "You shitty thing. Time to teach you some manner." John was tolerant no more, and it was time for payback. He pinned the vine on the table and took a screwdriver, then stabbed it at the base of the vine, pinning it completely to the table, and held the other part. "I promise you to make this the most painful experience in your miserable life, you fucker." John searched his tools and took out one of the rarest and dreadful torture tools that doesn't exist in Skyrim except in his toolbox imported by order from Cyrodiil, the caliper. Reference to Make the Liar. Now, show me those baby thorns." As the vine was pinned like an eel, John started using the caliper to pluck all the thorns on the vine. To no surprise, the vine actually started to bleed like a living body. Hee, what a bastard. I assume that blood belongs to me. Can't waste it now, can I? John took a bucket and gathered all the blood in it. His blood was not normal, as it can't spoil by simply getting exposed to air. John made sure to also keep the blood he extracted clean and in low temperature. After he finished plucking all the thorns from the vine, he looked at it now that its appearance turned from the vigorous monster it used to be to a sorry limb. What? You think it is over? I never knew this would be so much fun. Let's keep going. John took out a knife and started cutting the surface layer of the vine, then stuffed a finger and pulled it as fast as he could. It was the same process of skinning an eel. The vine withered in pain as it lost both its thorns and the surface layer. It was truly a sorry sight, but John was feeling genuinely pleased. John threw the surface layer in a bowl and kept draining the vine for more blood. The surprising thing was the amount of blood that came out. It was shockingly much more than expected and reached a total of 3 full buckets thus far. That's way more than 9 liters, you bastard. With my size, I should have been already dead 9 times over. John clenched his teeth and kept cutting the body of the vine itself into threads vertically. It was a great experience and a payback. The threads he cut were also alive and started piling on the bowl he made until the vine was no more. Phew, that was consuming but really fun. Looking at how the Briarheart blood vine ended like, John was completely satisfied. Even though he didn't know how to torture a vine, he could just turn it into fine threads. The terrifying thing was how it turned into something really horrifying to look at. A pile of threads wiggling on itself, trying to turn back to its former appearance. Even though it has John's essence energy, it lost all the blood and was now rendered useless. It had no specific use to John, but he has finally established some sort of authority on it. Storing it back in the cube alongside the blood buckets, John cleaned the room of any evidence and sat down thinking. As he was about to do anything else when the door to his room opened and Serana entered. That's a strong scent of blood coming from here, she remarked. I was torturing something, John said. You are oddly a vampire material. John chuckled to her comment. So, cute little fangs, what brings you here? Quit calling me that. Sweet poisonberry? No. Devil blood claws? Stop it. I came here to tell you that they brought the device. Sigh. John made a tired face. Did you finish your plan? She asked. It is getting more complicated than I thought. I at least managed to devise some methods to escape back to Nirn, but I need materials. John said with disheartened face. Hey, do you know what is the power source for this domain? To John's sudden question, Serana almost jumped from fright. John smiled faintly as it seems that his theory was correct all along. How did you find about? She asked. I am a mage. Well, I may not look like it, but I am a very capable one. Now tell me, what is the power source of this domain? Serana sighed. It is a closely guarded secret only Father and Mother know about. Mother told me later, but I haven't told Father that I know. She said. Finally some good news. John's face lit up. If we can weaken that power source, we can slip away from your father unnoticed. Serana nodded. But the only problem will be how to get to it unnoticed, she said. Father keep it under watch all the time. I am sure for a little kid who grew around the castle, you should know a thing or two about secret passages and methods to sneak around, John said with a naughty face. I was not that kind of child, believe me. Serana dismissed John's ideas. John nodded with an understanding face. Serana's backstory had many family struggles and fights between her parents. The bad drama on a vampire demonic cult theme, nasty bit of business. However, there are those cloaks which are made of void cloth. They can slip through the gargoyles without being noticed, one of the reasons why Father is very careful about keeping them in the deepest part of the armory. We'll need to figure out how to steal them first, she said. John's face became blank, and he held the cube. Say no more. John took out 2 void cloth cloaks right away. He handed one void cloak to Serana. How do you have that? She asked with a dazed face. Let's say when we were fighting at that platform, I intentionally killed some vampires with those cloaks and looted them before throwing them from the platform, John said. Wait, while fighting me the other day? Yes. You had time to target other vampires and steal their cloaks, then throw them off the platform? Naturally. She took the cloak without saying anything. We have a few minutes before the men coming to take you to the device. We need to hurry. At the Fokihar Cathedral, where John woke up for the first time in the castle after he was kidnapped by Harkon, he and Serana stood beside each other. "Here is the domain's core?" John asked. "You are looking right at it." Serana pointed. John sighed and shook his head. "Surely the best way to hide something is to keep it obvious." That was his remark. The domain core was none other than the altar of Molagbal in the Fokihar Cathedral. It was that altar that appeared in the game which had the head of Molagbal and blood flows from it to the sink under the head. Its appearance was as diabolical as the game. John and Serana approached the altar and examined it closely. The first thing to notice was how unnatural the blood flowing in the altar was. "This is no normal blood." "You are right. This is blood plasm, the fuel to the domain cure." Serana confirmed and added, "It is also a method to resurrect fallen vampires. If a vampire died, Father has the ability to trap their souls in soul gems, then return to put these soul gems in the sink here. Sometime later, the fallen vampire gets resurrected. Just like the chaotic creation?" "I see, amazing." John couldn't hide his surprise. "I don't think you can destroy the altar because it is a dumb move, but you should do something about the blood plasm," Serana said. "Hee, lucky me." John smiled and took out something from the cube. It was a bowl filled with a living thing that looked like bloody threads of a certain fiber. John spilled the content of the bowl in the sink. What was that?" Serana asked. "Something to eat up the fuel of the domain. Think of it as a blood-hungry dry sponge." Chapter 368. Escaping Castle Fokihar. 4 days until the Battle of Winterhold. On the watchtower outside Castle Fokihar, John stood gazing at the gloomy sky with vampires surrounding him. He then looked at the telescope-like device in front of him and wondered. "So this is the transseminal scanner. I can't believe I lived long enough to see one." "Quit making a fuss, mortal. Lord Harkon wants you to start immediately." Yeah. So, how do I start up that thing?" I don't know. Figure it out." What sort of half-assed reply is that? Do you want to have a graveless death? Shit for brain? Mortal, how dare you speak to Sigh, your funeral. The Wabajack found itself in the hand of John blasting a vampire. Once the effect landed, the vampire literally exploded into a pile of gold coins. Well, that's one way to get rich. The vampires always treated John with contempt, even the lesser one of them. He had no problem putting all of them to shape, even if it conjured Harkon himself. "This will cause you a problem." A voice called for John. John turned around to see Serana coming over with other vampire lords. "My lady, I was just doing the routine. John Dare was called Dare for a reason." John replied politely. "You reasons don't apply here, and that won't pass without punishment." One of the vampire lords came forward towards John with a resentful look. John recognized the vampire as Orthjolf, a senior vampire at Harkon's court. "Punish me? Who the fuck do you think you are? Want me to stick the Wabajack through your butthole and see how I turn your intestines into green jelly?" "That's it, mortal. I don't care what you are anymore." Orthjolf was already transforming into a vampire lord and extending his hands at John. Without even having the time to react, Orthjolf lost his left and right arms in a single split of a second. There was no time to tell what happened. John was drawing a black sword made of greed, which cut the left arm, but what cut the right was not John. It was the terrifying presence that came from behind him all of a sudden. It was Serana in her vampire lord form. John saw that and couldn't help but smile wryly. She truly fits the description of the beauty within the beast. Scram! With a single angry shout of Serana, Orthjolf was already on back in his normal form, crawling away. She reverted to her normal form too, then spoke with annoyance. "Leave us alone." No vampire, neither lesser or a lord, dared to disobey her, and all walked away. She looked at John and sighed. "You are truly a troublemaker. I just don't get it when someone says, 'How dare you?' as if it's the most obvious thing in the world. I just did something fully aware of myself doing it, and then someone has the audacity to question my actions that I just did? What kind of twisted logic is that?" I am not sure whose logic is wrong here. Technically, you are a prisoner to my clan, right? Prisoner? Is that what you guys see me? Just what in the world do you think was happening since father kidnapped you? I thought I was a guest invited by force. Oh, I see. That's what a prisoner is. Serana had no energy to question John's logic anymore. So, if I am your prisoner, that means you can do whatever you want to do with me, right? Johns approached Serana with a dirty smile. No, thanks. Serana pushed John's face away. Shame. Nice attack, though. Oh, it was nothing. You swordplay was strange. That was not me. Ever since greed swallowed a void cloth cloak, it became very stealthy and no one can detect its movement easily. I'll pretend I know what you were talking about. John retreated and then looked at Serana's shadow. Is it done? Done and done. Serana nodded. She tapped on her shadow and it started to come to life. Nefertiti jumped out from Serana's shadow with the cube. John crouched down and took the cube from her, then checked its content. I can't believe it. Harkon will be pissed when he finds out. John said. Inside the cube, there was a certain item that made John's life twice as hard during the last 5 days, the Elder Scroll of Sunday. John didn't take the Elder Scroll out and kept looking at it through the mental image from the cube. It was a true spectacle. Even I am not immune to the mystic effect of the Elder Scrolls. Actually, I should be weak to it just like dragons. John thought. Don't worry about him. He teleported to the temple of Lord Molag Bal to pay respect. We may have a day or two before he comes. Good. That's one unusual cat, Serana remarked as she looked at Nefertiti, who stole the Elder Scroll without triggering any alarm. You are one unusual vampire too, Nefertiti replied. To such a sudden reply, Serana almost froze, doubting her ears. It was the first time she hears Nefertiti's voice. Okay, ladies. Time is of the essence. This is for you. John handed a void cloth cloak to Serana and covered himself with greed. He then took the skull of corruption and pointed it at Serana. What are you doing? Serana was about to feel betrayed, but soon after, she found herself staring to her reflection. John created a clone of Serana by the ability of the skull of corruption and created another one for himself. Don't get too close. Those clones are treacherous and will do anything to betray us. John warned Serana as he pulled her away from her clone. The clones of John and Serana kept staring at the original ones as if trying to seize up any chance to steal the skull of corruption. But John was already used to the trick. I created you too with 1/10 of the required magicka, so you are nothing more than husks, John said as he injured his thumb and marked the clones with the blood. By the power of my blood, I mark you foul clones, blood tag. By the power of the mark, you clones are bound to never move from this spot for 3 days. You are to keep sitting on this machine, and you are to keep guard, blood curse. The result was amazing. No magic can create clones like the skull of corruption, S ability, and no magic can bind evil entities like the blood magic. As all preparations were complete, John returned the cube to Nefertiti in his shadow, then he and Serana jumped down the watchtower stealthily. Hurriedly taking a boat, John started rowing on the sea of the azure plasm towards the shore on the other side, towards Cold Harbor. The boat moved steadily on the dormant surface of the azure plasm. John started rowing alone as Serana was observing the terrain from afar by magic. I haven't been here for centuries, Serana said. I heard that there was a thing called the plane meld when Lord Molag Bal tried to pull Tamriel into Cold Harbor. Things must have changed ever since then. Yeah, I am aware of Molag's little folly. It was a chaotic age. I spent most the past few days reading about it along with other things. A man becoming a god, an evil mage kidnapping an emperor, the Numidium walking, a disease that almost killing off Morrowind. The 3 god kings of Morrowind have fallen. An oblivion crisis and the return of Umaril the Unfeathered to be slain by a divine knight. The world. It was so much fun while I was sealed. Serana lamented. Hee hee. These times were not that fun for the people who lived it. John laughed. On the plus side, there are going to be some events in the future like those. Don't worry, I'll make sure you witness them all. What are those? You want spoilers already? Serana turned her head away. No, just what makes you so sure about it? My past life, 3 Elder Scrolls, a vampire lord trying to block the sun. Do I need to continue? Haha, no, I believe you. As John and Serana looked forward, they saw themselves arriving at the cliffs surrounding Cold Harbor. There were a few canals and passages the boat can move on, so John picked one randomly. You think we will be caught? She asked. By whom? I don't think the Daedra will cause any problem if we avoided the powerful auras. We still need a guide. I know, but we ran out of options. We will have to tread carefully and look for a way out of Cold Harbor. Locked or not, I have the mean to go through anything. John guaranteed. Fine, I still can't believe I am doing this. Doing what? Going against father? It is okay. You said you were not that kind of child, but you need to go through a rebellious phase once in your lifetime, no? Don't worry about it. If you want to blame anything, blame my blood that I made you drink. Its effect may have given you some courage to go against your father. Serana couldn't help but laugh. What is so funny? It's their blood, best in the world. Ha ha ha. Stop it. You are killing me. The mere thought of going against her father because she drank some kind of blood was hilarious in her opinion. She felt it was right, but wanted to believe that the strength came from inside her. Shush! Before she continues laughing or saying anything, John hushed her and pointed forward. He detected a faint presence just a moment ago slowed down. Don't worry. As a daughter of Cold Harbor, I can at least walk around the realm. Act as my second. John nodded, and the two kept silent. As the boat moved in the narrow river between the two cliffs, John noticed the owner of the presence. Surprisingly, it was another mortal like him. This is a sponsored character by Merker1. John was not confused to find a fellow mortal in Cold Harbor, but the confusing thing was how this mortal behaved. She was donned in a cloak and hid their features just like John and Serana, but more to that. The mortal was sitting on the cliff with a fishing rod in her hand, and the line was in the azure plasm. John's brows betrayed his poker face, but he found Serana not reacting to such oddity. He then heightened his senses and started detecting under the water, only to find a ton of aquatic life crawling under the azure plasm. Strange fish and creepy creature were all over the place. John looked at the fisherman that was not reacting to the passer boat and smiled. He then used telekinesis and caught an eel-like fish, then attached it to the hook of the fishing rod. The fisherman/woman reacted immediately to John's magic, and her eyes gleamed. With slight nods, John and the fisherman/woman exchanged greetings. Odd fellow, John remarked after he passed the fishing area. You are the odd fellow. Fishing with telekinesis? Serana replied. Don't blame me. I just thought our appearance must have scared the fish away, and making a fast friendship like this may actually help us in the future. John said, helping people for good luck. Never took you for a good guy. It is called exchanging favors. John and Serana kept opening many conversations until they arrived at a waterfall. They could only stop the boat at the banks of the river and continue on foot. Don't do anything flashy with magic. The Daedra are sensitive bastards, John said, and started to climb the way up the waterfall with ease. Both him and Serana were beings that transcended humanity and faced no problem parkouring on harsh terrain. Even with his left foot being replaced by a part of greed, John was still the same skeever who grew up in Rift End despite his size. As they arrived at the highest point on the rooks, they stood beside each other and looked at the sight in front of them. Goodness, John spoke in wonder. The realm of Molag Bal, this is Cold Harbor. Much different than what I remember, Serana said. We are in the shrouded plain though. With basic directions, we can navigate. What now? John pondered for a few seconds then spoke. We have an easy way and a difficult way. The easy way is to find an old portal and open it, but the connection between Cold Harbor and Nirn is hard to simply establish, so portals will be rare. True. What is the hard way? The difficult way is to use fate magic. Never heard of it. The term was put by me. It is a sort of hedge magic that manipulates fate by manipulating the chances, the karma, and luck to create a line of events that leads to a certain effect. That's very obscure. That's why I call it fate magic. What do you need? Sarana asked. We are speaking about escaping from Cold Harbor here, which means escaping Molag Bal. I needed the bane to the darkness of Molag. I need the sin of Nirn to find the way home. I need a sigil stone to open a portal. I also need tough material that can travel through space without withering. I need something that can link all those components together with magic without disintegrating. Too many things. Not enough time, and obviously won't be easy to find all found in Cold Harbor. I know, that's why I need to find Zykel and convince him to help me. All I know about him is that he is in the Tower of Lies somewhere in this realm. John said. Great. Let's hope the locals are friendly enough to give us directions. Chapter 369, Saving Zykel. The ever-dim sky of Cold Harbor covered its ever-dark wasteland of dead trees, floating stones, and towering sharp rocks. The realm itself conveyed the pain and suffering billions of souls that passed over this place since its damnable creation. Through these shrouded plains, John and Sarana traveled on a pair of cold flame Atronak horses. Not sure if it was some old ruins or a proper stop, the two stopped at every ruin checking for inhabitants. They rode past many odd life forms and exotic creatures that belonged to Cold Harbor, but the ticking clock was suppressing all sorts of curiosities that may pop up in their minds. John could determine that staying in a realm like Cold Harbor for too long may actually prove fatal on one's mental health. After some time, John and Sarana could spot a few odd-looking pyramid-like buildings north of them. As they approached, John could feel that these buildings carried a resemblance to the ancient Aztec style, or rather its counterpart in this world. An Argonian village. Really? Sarana looked with curiosity. Looks rather empty, though. The two rode slowly to the village and found it lying in ruins. John tried to remember if anything was mentioned about this village in any Elder Scroll game he played, and he remembered something. Hajuxith, that's the village name. How do you know? 1,000 years ago during the Plane Meld, the village was discovered in Cold Harbor when explorers started to come and go. Apparently, it was dragged to this realm since ancient times, and was the history of the village made a deal with Molag Bal to harvest its sap for the safety of the village inhabitants. You know how the Histries and the Argonians are connected, right? Yeah. And so, after the explorers arrived, the Argonians sought them out for help. The Hist was sick and suffering from the machines the Daedra used to extract its sap with. Whether the Hist tree was put to rest or got maintained is unknown, but by the looks of things, asking the tree to endure 1,000 years is still impossible. The village is in ruins, as you see. The Hist are a sentient race of giant spore trees that the Argonians are deeply connected to and in both society and religion. As John and Sarana rode, arrived at a large tree with a very thick trunk with small branches on its top and the roots stuck in a pool of the azure plasm. There was a large crack at the trunk that made John curious as he approached it by casting Water Walk to see how the tree died, but as he tried to look inside, a pair of sharp sickles was aimed at this neck. John retreated in one jump to see those sickles coming from the large crack on the dead Hist and a creature crawling out of the tree. Sarana ran beside John and evoked magic on her hands. Be careful, that's a spider, Daedra. John looked with disappointment at the spider Daedra that crawled out of the tree and shook his head. It completely ruined my fantasy about Arachne girls. Just as John mumbled, the spider Daedra is exactly an Arachne, a half-woman, half-spider. Still, its appearance was nothing like the fantasy fictions he knew. It was a hideous monstrosity with a body made of scales, chitin scales, until the bosom, then a face of that can barely be called a woman's, all that on 9 spider legs and 2 human arms. Bloodskull appeared on John's hand. Hiya! He waved the sword at the spider Daedra from afar, unleashing multiple crescents of Tyrant Aura. targeting the spider's limbs. The spider Deidre was nimble and fast. Recognizing John as someone strong, it started avoiding all the energy attacks as its life depending on it, but John was already trapping it to move as he wanted and cut 3 legs. Shriek. The spider Deidre shrieked, and a few auras started to appear around. John checked to see smaller versions of the spider Deidre, called the spiderlings, are crawling all over the place towards him. Dirty. Using your children to fight for you. John didn't care anyway, and waved his sword to rip them to pieces. As the spider Deidre finally was free from John's volley of attacks, it evoked magic on its hands and shot lightning towards John. John was about to put that rude creature in place, but Serana stepped in and joined the fight. Take care of the small ones. Leave that to me. Aye, sir. Lady. John effortlessly killed the little spiderlings that tried to attack him in melee, while Serana took care of the big one. The spider Deidre used the lightning magic as well as spitting webs and poison, but Serana negated it all with frost magic. Out of the blue, another spider Deidre appeared and another one followed it. I see. So it was buying time using its kids for its sisters to come. TSK, I still never understood why Joel would like those creatures. John and Serana were trying to avoid the flashy magic, but in the end, they had to end it fast. Nefertiti joined up in her larger form, and John used Blood Skull to send crescent blades of his aura and used a portion of Greed as a blaster gun shooting out his aura too. The fight was easily over afterward. Let's leave before anything shows up. John was in a hurry and conjured 2 Atronak horses to ride away. As they were getting out of the village, Serana noticed something. Did you use arrows? No, just my aura. Why? I can swear that some of the monsters were dead to arrows. It needs a lot of power to kill those things with just a bow, and I felt nothing. Are you sure? Yes. Strange. I didn't feel any aura. Let's just leave and keep a careful watch around. John and Serana rode as fast as they could to lose any trackers if there was any. Very convenient, this aura thing, Serana said. Yes, you didn't learn it. No, I don't know if I will even need it. I see. Practicing it requires a strong personality and a fixed martial style. It is called battle spirit after all. How do you use it? Did you notice the sounds I made when I fight? Those embarrassing sounds? Well, embarrassing at first, but you need to understand them. For example, if I punch and shout with my willpower, a magical effect will appear. With practice, you don't need to shout loudly or anything, just some humming is enough. I see. So it is tonal magic? Right answer. It is known locally as the aura in Tamriel and as battle spirit to the scholars. Its origin was the continent of Akavir, and it was known as the Ki. It is said that when the Empire sent an expedition to Akavir, the people there were used magic in ways never seen before, and it is said that the Akaviri Ki masters can conjure storms and bend the weather, causing the Imperial army to fall to hunger with no rain grow crops in their colonies. That's insane. Come on, what is insane is your father. He managed to manifest his aura into a blood sundae, bending the nature that much by the aura is a true mystery even for my father's level. John said. I know. Serana confirmed. If you saw my father's weapon, then you should have a hint or two about my father's power. John didn't need to rack his brain about it. He knew exactly what Harkon's weapon from the game was. A katana. Anyway, let's focus. Do you still remember where the Tower of Lies is? John asked. Between the Shrouded Plain and Fist of Stone? Fine. Even though John played the Elder Scrolls Online once and it introduced Cold Harbor, the realm was much different, even more than the difference between Skyrim versions in game and reality. 1,000 years is a lot of time after all. John and Serana arrived at a towering ruin that resembled a different civilization than the Aztec-like Argonian village they passed. It was Ayleid Ruin. The Library of Dusk? The only library I will never enter. John said. A library? You can't be serious? What? Even the Lord of Lies needs a library to record his lies. Those who enter, however, are kinda trapped. I see that kind of library. Sounds befitting of Lord Molagbal. The two didn't stop and kept riding past the ruins of the library. From this point onward, Daedric wild monsters started to appear. The speed advantage of the Atronak horses combined with the magic John and Serana made the road very clear and no monsters approached them in the next few hours. It was about time that they started to notice signs of life, or rather signs of Daedra moving. The two diverted from the road and moved on foot to hide away from the road. It was a medium-sized Dremora patrol that seemed a bit laid back. John and Serana realized they are near the place they are after. As they started sneaking to the north, they saw a large floating rock with a tree on top of it linked by a stone bridge to a stone dome a bit higher from the ground. The funny thing about the Tower of Lies is the lie about it being a tower when it is a deep pit, Serana remarked. Well, old Molag is playing another untasteful joke, John said as he started crawling on the ground. What are you doing? Doing some recon. Get down, princess. John started to scan the place with magic and noticed the patrols around the place. There were not just Dremora patrollers, there was a horde of slaves in rags. These were the Soul Shriven. These were mortals whose souls got stolen by Molagbal and replaced with a Daedric soul, or a Vistage. By that, they became creatures belonging to the realm of Cold Harbor, and their bodies reformed like the Daedra from the Azure Plasm. The different thing about their new bodies that it is rotting and decaying slowly from the inside. The soul-shriven body is a complete waste built on an ancestral form filled with foul energy rather than its pure anuic soul. It can grant immortality, but still, it doesn't equal living in a healthy and beautiful body. These soul-shriven were ashen pale both in skin and hair color. Their eyes are devoid from any hope of salvation or rest, and they are forced to mine all day long with chains around their necks until their bodies break and die. Once they die, they revive again from the Azure Plasm like the Daedra to go through the whole chain of suffering again. John was watching all that from the edge of a cliff, viewing the wide banks of a certain Azure Plasm river. He could see everything clearly from there. John took off greed and reshaped it into a chant with a clutch at its end and kept waiting. What are you doing? Fishing. As a certain Dremora started to stray from his group down at the mining area, John threw greed and caught the Dremora from the head then. In a split of a second, the Daedra churl was at the feet of both John and Serana with its mouth gagged by greed. Easy way and a hard way. Speak or get tortured. I was doing that a lot lately, so I guess I got better at torturing. Point is, a Kinvil goes by the name Zykel. Where is he? Groan. Fine, the hard way, John said as he took out a mammoth tusk from the cube. In a place not far away from John, a certain figure was being hung by his arms and getting punched in his ribs by an angry Dremora. That's some nerve you have, little worm. You ran from your post not once, not twice, but 3 times all in one day. The angry Dremora said, Markinaz, I am sorry. I was conjured to Nern. The beat-up Kinvil was puking blood. Conjured? 3 times? The same idiot Dremora gets summoned 3 times in one day? By the Lord's name, that's a record. Ha ha ha. Markinaz Marks was not buying it. The slapping and beating were on for almost 2 days straight at this point. Zykel was already fed up with it, but he can't do anything to his highest superior, especially when it comes to the overseer of the Tower of Lies, Markinaz Marks. Kenreeve, make sure that this worm learns a good lesson. Yes, Markinaz. Marks left the torture process to another, and went someplace else as he already got bored with Zykel. Kywyan, Reeve. You know I was conjured, you saw it? Zykel spoke to his direct superior. Kid, it's okay. Just endure it for a while. What? Then why didn't you say anything for me? What do you want me to say? That you really got conjured 3 times in the same day? Truth be told, your record when it comes to being conjured is scary. Can't you even resist some mortal conjuration, you dimwit? If I could, I wouldn't be like this. And this is not some mortal, it is a monster in mortal flesh. The damn thing is haunting me. A mortal haunting a Daedra? Kid, you have fallen too low. Slap. That mortal you are speaking too highly about is imprisoned by one of the Lord's lieutenants. It is impossible that he can conjure you. You know that? Moreover, that lieutenant is here in Cold Harbor. Didn't you get the news about the vampires arriving at Cold Harbor? Wait, that mortal is here? In Cold Harbor? Zykel's sense of crisis heightened up all of a sudden. Yes, the vampires came some time ago and borrowed the spare, transliminal scanner to look for something in Oblivion. They said your mortal is. Zykel noticed the Kinreeve stuttering on words. Looking closely, a red blade was penetrating the Kinreeve's chest and suddenly was pulled back and waved to cut his head. Hey boy. TSK. Those amateurs got you for real. Want a princess carry down from there? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.